Chapter 1324. Mu Nianyan placed her left hand on Yi Xian's chest. A powerful force slowly seeped into Yi Xian's body. Gradually Yi Xian's bloodline power calmed down. After a while Yi Xian slowly opened his eyes. When he saw Mu Nianyan he was stunned. Then he smiled bitterly. "Sister Nian." Mu Nianyan smiled faintly. "Do you feel better?" Yi Xian shook his head. "I've caused you trouble again." Mu Nianyan said softly. "You're very silly." Yi Xian looked at Mu Nianyan. Mu Nianyan gently wiped the blood off Yi Xian's face. "My injury can't be healed by the Yellow Springs holy water." Yi Xian frowned. "Not even the Yellow Springs holy water?" Mu Nianyan nodded. "Of course not. Otherwise I would have come to rob it." Yi Xian quickly asked. "What about that white guy's purple aura?" Mu Nianyan shook her head. "That purple aura is useful to me. But it can't heal my injury." Yi Xian still wanted to say something. Mu Nianyan smiled. "My injury was caused by myself. No one can help me except myself." Yi Xian was about to speak. Suddenly, a hideous voice came from afar. "Bitch! How dare you hurt me?" Yi Xian and Mu Nianyan looked up. The sixth princess had returned. However, there was still a sword stuck in the sixth princess's chest. But she was still alive. It was as if some kind of power was protecting her. Next to the sixth princess, the Netherworld Emperor said, "Sixth princess, this person is not simple." Sixth princess didn't care at all. She looked at Mu Nianyan with hatred and said crazily, "Bitch you!" Right at this time Mu Nianyan suddenly disappeared. Not far away, the Netherworld Great Emperor's expression changed drastically. "Princess, be careful." As he spoke, he was just about to attack when Mu Nianyan had appeared in front of the sixth princess. The sixth princess's expression changed drastically, and she clenched her fists tightly. In an instant, countless bolts of lightning converged around her and formed a powerful barrier of lightning. However, Mu Nianyan ignored the lightning and grabbed the sixth princess by the throat. Boom! Those lightning bolts instantly disappeared without a trace. Everyone in the surroundings was dumbstruck when they witnessed this scene. The sixth princess was a Dao Defense Realm expert. Although it was a little overpowered, it shouldn't be enough to defeat him in one move. The sixth princess was also in disbelief. She never thought that she would be defeated in a single move. At this moment, Mu Nianyan laughed and said, "Your mouth stinks." With that, she grabbed the sixth princess's mouth with both hands and tore it apart. Under the watchful eyes of everyone, the sixth princess' mouth was ripped open. A heart-wrenching shrill cry instantly resounded. At this moment, the sixth princess's extremely beautiful face had become extremely ferocious. After she tore apart the sixth princess' mouth, Mu Nianyan smashed her against the ground, and then she stomped her foot on the sixth princess' face. Mu Nianyan grinned, but it was a slightly ghastly smile. "You drained him dry? What kind of stinking brother are you?" The Netherworld Emperor spoke in a low voice. "Who exactly are you?" At this moment, the Netherworld Emperor had an extremely vigilant expression on his face because this woman was truly too terrifying. Mu Nianyan gazed at the Netherworld Emperor. "You're part of the reason why he's so heavily injured, right?" The Netherworld Emperor's eyes narrowed slightly, and he didn't hesitate to clench his fists tightly. In an instant, countless spirits converged into his body, and then the space before him suddenly transformed into a deathly silent expanse. Moreover, the howls of countless spirits resounded throughout this deathly silent expanse. At this moment, a ray of sword light suddenly entered the deathly stillness. In the next moment, under everyone's shocked gazes, the ray of sword light tore the deathly stillness apart. Then, the ray of sword light pierced the Netherworld Emperor's forehead. Bang! The Netherworld Emperor's soul was obliterated. He was instantly killed with a single attack. At this moment, all the experts from the Nether Dimension were astounded, and they gazed at Mu Nianyan as if she was a monster. Who exactly is she? She's actually so terrifying. Mu Nianyan didn't attack again. She just held the sixth princess by her hair and walked slowly towards Yi Xian who stood nearby. The sixth princess was being dragged like a piece of trash. When has the noble sixth princess ever suffered such humiliation? The sixth princess roared madly. However, Mu Nianyan paid no attention to her. She dragged the sixth princess over to Yi Xian and smiled, "Kill her." Yi Xian picked up the sword spirit. Suddenly, Gehenna King spoke abruptly, "Do you know who she is?" Mu Nianyan gazed at Gehenna King and smiled, "Who is she?" Gehenna King spoke solemnly, "She's the sixth princess that the Taoist ancestor dotes on the most." Doubting. Mu Nianyan blinked, "So she's doubting. No wonder she's so arrogant." As she spoke, she looked at the sixth princess in front of her. The sixth princess glared at Mu Niannian with hatred. My father won't let you off. Gehenna King shook his head and couldn't help but curse in his heart. Damn, isn't this woman too stupid? Even now, she still doesn't understand the situation? Big sister, the woman holding the sword in front of you is most likely a real Dao breaker. In front of such a strong person, shouldn't you restrain your bad temper? Mu Niannian laughed. This is the first time I've seen such a stupid woman like you. After that, she looked at Yi Xian. Kill her. Yi Xian was about to make a move when Nanzang suddenly stepped forward and clasped his hands together. Young Master Yi, please show mercy. Yi Xian looked at Nanzang. Nanzang said softly, Mr. Yi, have you ever thought that although you felt great when you swung your sword down, although you'll feel happy with this strike, you and the lady next to you will have endless trouble? Yi Xian was silent. Mu Niannian gently stroked Yi Xian's cheek and smiled. Are you afraid? Yi Xian shook his head. I'm not afraid, but I don't want to cause trouble for you. He didn't forget that Mu Niannian was injured. Now that the fifth dimension tribulation was about to arrive, if he killed this woman, doubting would target Mu Niannian. In the distance, Nanzang said, Young Master Yi, doubting is not something the two of you can resist. Ayin nodded. If you kill her, it's the same as provoking doubting. Mu Niannian suddenly smiled. You too, when she wanted to kill my little brother, why didn't you come out? Ayin looked at Mu Niannian. Your Excellency, we advised you not to kill her, it was for your own good. Mu Niannian suddenly disappeared. In the next instant, a sword was pressed against Ayin's forehead. Ayin looked at Mu Niannian and didn't resist, her expression calm. Mu Niannian smiled. You came out to speak not for our own good, but to save this doubting sixth princess, so that doubting will owe you a favor, right? Ayin was silent. Mu Niannian suddenly slashed down. One of Ayin's arms flew off. Ayin frowned, her left hand slowly clenched. Mu Niannian smiled, she lightly patted Ayin's cheek with her sword. Spirit of the underworld, I don't blame you for not saving this little guy before. After all, you don't owe this little guy anything, there's no need to offend such a big power like doubting for a little guy. But now you want to use him to make doubting owe you a favor, and you even say it's for our own good. Playing such petty tricks with me? As she said that, she waved her left hand, and a sword suddenly landed in her hand. Soul-suppressing sword. Seeing this, Ayin's expression changed. Mu Niannian smiled. If your sword absorbs this spirit of the underworld, it can go up another level. At this moment, Ayin suddenly clenched her left hand, and in an instant the entire underworld trembled. In an instant, the power of countless Yin spirits gathered here. Mu Niannian chuckled and slashed forward. With this slash, all the Yin spirits in the world dispersed. In an instant, Ayin's soul became illusory. Everyone's expression changed. This slash directly injured the source of the underworld. Ayin stared at Mu Niannian. I underestimated you. Mu Niannian blinked. Do you think you can see through me now? With that, she stabbed soul-suppressing sword at Ayin. At this moment, Ayin suddenly looked at Yi Xian. If it wasn't for my help, you wouldn't have reached the Yellow Spring River. Yi Xian glanced at Ayin, then at Mu Niannian. Sister Nian, forget it. She helped me reach the Yellow Spring River. Mu Niannian thought about it, then nodded and let go of Ayin. You're even. With that, she looked at Ayin, the corners of her mouth lifting slightly. You're so stupid, using such a favor just like that. Ayin's pupils shrank. You did it on purpose. Mu Niannian smiled. Spirit of the underworld, I won't kill you this time, but next time you dare to scheme against this little guy, I will destroy your soul. This little guy can only be schemed against by me alone. With that, she turned to Nanzang. What are you looking at? Why aren't you scramming? Nanzang's expression changed slightly, but he didn't say anything. He put his palms together and quietly retreated. Mu Niannian turned to Yi Xian, placed the sword in Yi Xian's hand, then pointed at sixth princess on the ground. Stab her to death. Yi Xian looked at sixth princess, who said fiercely, doubting. With that, Yi Xian suddenly said, doubting your grandmother? As he spoke, he held the sword with both hands and stabbed it towards sixth princess' chest. Right at this moment, a mysterious force suddenly appeared before sixth princess' chest, and Yi Xian's sword couldn't move an inch further. Space suddenly split open in the sky, and then an old man in a Taoist robe walked out from within. Dalord Qingming. One of the 4 great experts of the underworld. Moreover, Dalord Qingming was from doubting. Mu Niannian looked at Dalord Qingming and smiled without saying a word. Dalord Qingming gazed at Mu Niannian with a vigilant expression. Daobreaker. Mu Niannian didn't answer Dalord Qingming, and she looked at Yi Xian instead. She was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly said, "I understand." As soon as he finished speaking, he stabbed his sword into Sixth Princess' abdomen. Blood sprayed. A powerful strand of sword intent raged madly within Sixth Princess' body. Sixth Princess was stunned by this scene, and then her voice trembled. You actually dared to kill me?" Yi Xian thought for a moment and then he said, "Does it hurt?" Everyone was speechless. Dao Lord Qingming stared fixedly at Yi Xian and Mu Niannian. "Both of you are finished. P.S. I've already given up on monthly votes. I want to be an author with backbone, and I'll never bow down for monthly votes. Never." Chapter 1325. Kill. At first, Yi Xian did not want to kill because he was afraid of causing trouble for Mu Niannian. But then he changed his mind. Because he realized that even if he did not kill her, would this woman let it go? This woman would never let this matter rest. Since that was the case, why not kill her? Killing one is one. After Yi Xian stabbed the Sixth Princess to death, he took out the soul-suppressing sword and stabbed it into the Sixth Princess' body. In an instant, the Sixth Princess' soul was absorbed completely. Seeing the Sixth Princess' soul being absorbed, the expressions of all the underworld powerhouses changed. Yi Xian really killed the doubting Sixth Princess. Not only did he kill her, but he also absorbed her soul. This was not an ordinary kind of ruthless move. Not far away, Gehenna King glanced at Mu Niannian and did not say anything. At this time he did not dare to say anything. Was this woman in front of him confident? Or did she not understand doubting at all? It should be said that it was both. If this woman understood doubting, perhaps she would not have done things so ruthlessly. No matter what, doubting would definitely not let this matter go. However, this was not the end. Mu Niannian looked at Dao Lord Qingming, who said softly, "You are very brave. I hope you do not regret it." After saying that, he gradually became illusory. He did not choose to make a move because he was not confident that he could win. Moreover, there was no need to make a move. Doubting would naturally have someone to deal with this woman. What he needed to do now was to inform Doubting. Beside Mu Niannian, Yi Xian said in a low voice, "He should have gone to call for help." Mu Niannian nodded and smiled. "I deliberately let him go." Yi Xian glanced at Mu Niannian. "Sister Nian, is Doubting very powerful?" Mu Niannian laughed. "It's just so." Yi Xian was speechless. At this time, Mu Niannian glanced at Yi Xian. Right now, Yi Xian had a head full of white hair, his face was old and his body was broken into pieces. He was as miserable as one could imagine. Mu Niannian gently stroked Yi Xian's snow-white hair and softly said, "You are so silly." As she spoke, she gazed at the experts from the nether dimension, and then she opened her palm and a sword appeared there. The expressions of all the experts from the Yin dimension changed drastically when they witnessed this scene. At this moment, Mu Niannian suddenly looked up and saw a middle-aged man suddenly appear in the sky above Necropolis. In the next moment, the middle-aged man appeared in front of Mu Niannian. When they saw this person, all the experts of the Yin dimension hurriedly bowed respectfully. "Master of Yin." The middle-aged man in front of him was the Lord of the Underworld. Yin Master glanced at Yi Xian, and then he gazed at Mu Niannian. "All of you can leave." The experts of the Yin dimension exchanged glances when they heard this. "We're letting Yi Xian go just like that." Mu Niannian smiled. "I don't want to leave right now." Yin Master gazed at Mu Niannian. "The Doubting's forces will arrive in an hour at most." Mu Niannian nodded. "I'll wait for them here." Yin Master fell silent. Right at this moment, the sword in Mu Niannian's hand suddenly flew out, and then numerous heads flew up into the air. Yin Master frowned slightly, and then he opened his palm. In an instant, a black iron chain locked down that ray of light. Yin Master gazed at Mu Niannian. "If both of you leave now, then my nether dimension won't interfere in the matter between both of you and the Doubting." Mu Niannian suddenly pressed his fingers together and pointed forward. Bang! The imprisoned ray of light suddenly trembled violently, and then the black iron chain was slashed apart. The ray of light shot straight towards the Lord of the Underworld. The Lord of the Underworld frowned slightly, and then he pressed his palm forward lightly. As soon as he did so, countless strands of Yin energy and death energy instantly converged within his palm. The sword arrived. Bang! Under the astounded gazes of everyone, the Lord of the Underworld instantly retreated explosively by 3 kilometers. He'd repulsed the Lord of the Underworld with a single strike of his sword. Mu Niannian gazed at Yi Xian and grinned. "Anyone who injures you here must die." As soon as she finished speaking, her expression suddenly became slightly savage. In the next moment, she suddenly vanished on the spot with her sword in hand, and then her sword instantly pierced through a Dao-proving realm expert of the underworld. This expert hadn't even been able to react to what had happened. After this expert of the underworld was killed, Mu Niannian appeared in front of another expert of the underworld, and then a ray of light flashed as the head of a spirit flew into the air. In the distance, the Lord of the Underworld's eyes narrowed slightly, and then he suddenly spread open his right hand. In the next moment he suddenly clenched it tightly and smashed his fist forward. A formidable black-colored fist swept through the surroundings. Countless vengeful spirits and evil spirits roared within this black fist. In the distance, Mu Niannian suddenly stopped, and she didn't even turn around before she stabbed backwards with her sword. Bang! The black fist was directly forced to stop, and then it shattered into pieces in the next moment. Mu Niannian slashed with her sword while carrying the Lord of the Underworld on her back. A strand of sword energy tore through the sky. The Lord of the Underworld's pupils constricted, and he raised his arm horizontally to block it. Bang! The Lord of the Underworld instantly retreated explosively by another 3 kilometers. When he stopped, over 30 Dao-proving realm experts in the distant horizon had been annihilated. Even Ghost Emperor 10 Directions had been annihilated. All of them had been killed by a single sword strike. Just a single sword strike. Something worthy of mentioning was that she used the soul suppression sword, so the soul of every single expert of the underworld she killed would be absorbed by the soul suppression sword. On the other side, Wuxia gazed at Mu Niannian while he gulped, and then he walked over to Yi Xian's side and said, "My God! Brother, this big sister of yours is too ferocious. Does she lack a little brother? Why don't I call her big sister as well?" Yi Xian blinked, and then he patted Wuxia lightly on the shoulder. "If you recognize me as your big brother, then you'll be my little brother. Do you understand what I mean?" Wuxia shook his head. "I'm older than you. Just recognize me as your big brother." Yi Xian gazed at Wuxia. "Are you sure?" Wuxia's eyelids twitched. "I'm not sure. Let me think about it." He was slightly afraid when he saw the expression on Yi Xian's face. Damn it. This fellow is someone who doesn't pay with his life. Become his big brother? I'm afraid I'll be tricked to death. Yi Xian was about to speak when Mu Niannian suddenly appeared in front of him. She handed the soul suppression sword to Yi Xian. "This sword will become stronger." Yi Xian was silent. In fact, his heart was also unusually calm at this moment. In a short period of time, Mu Niannian had killed over 30 Dao validation experts. How terrifying was that? Moreover, it was under the circumstances that the Lord of the Underworld had made a move. Yi Xian took the soul suppression sword and then said, "Big Sister Nian, how strong are you?" Mu Niannian smiled slightly. "Not very strong. At least I can't beat that Qing'er of yours." Yi Xian almost fainted. Qing'er. Big Sister Nian was going against Qing. However, Yi Xian suddenly realized something. Big Sister Nian was so terrifying, but she still couldn't beat Qing'er. How strong was Qing'er? Yi Xian couldn't imagine it. At this moment, Mu Niannian suddenly said, "Open your mouth." Yi Xian instinctively opened his mouth. Mu Niannian took out a green bottle and opened it. Then she poured all the Yellow Springs holy water into Yi Xian's mouth. Yi Xian's expression changed drastically. He was about to spit it out when Mu Niannian glared at him. "Swallow it." Yi Xian smiled bitterly and didn't swallow it. Mu Niannian shook her head. "This Yellow Springs holy water is useless to me." Yi Xian frowned slightly. At this moment, Mu Niannian pointed a finger at his chest, and the netherworld holy water in Yi Xian's mouth was instantly swallowed. Yi Xian asked in a low voice, "Big Sister Nian, what injury are you suffering from?" Mu Niannian smiled. "I'm not suffering from injury but a responsibility. And this responsibility has trapped me." Yi Xian wanted to ask more, but Mu Niannian suddenly smiled. "Don't ask. You'll know soon enough." Yi Xian was silent. Mu Niannian looked around and said softly, "Do you remember what I told you? Even I don't want to provoke the underworld." Yi Xian nodded. "I'm sorry." Mu Niannian smiled. "When I first heard that you came to the underworld, I was very, very disappointed. I thought you had nothing to fear, that's why you dared to come to the underworld. But I didn't expect you to come for me." At this point she looked at Yi Xian and smiled. "Although you came for me, I still have to say that you're really stupid." Yi Xian nodded. "I just wanted to do something for you." Mu Niannian chuckled. "Fool, do you know that if I was a step late, you would have lost your life?" Yi Xian smiled bitterly. "I could have left really. But I didn't expect that woman to suddenly come. If it wasn't for doubting that woman, he really would have left." Mu Niannian looked at Yi Xian. "I chose you and helped you because I wanted to make use of you. Do you understand? Yixin was silent. Mu Niannian asked again, is it worth risking your life for someone who wants to use you? Yixin looked at Mu Niannian and smiled. Big Sister Nian. Big Sister Nian. This Big Sister Nian was better than 1,000 words. Mu Niannian suddenly shook her head and smiled. You, as she said, she gently rubbed Yixin's head. You look really ugly now. Quickly heal your injuries and restore your original appearance. Yixin sat cross-legged on the ground and began to heal his injuries. At this time Wu Xan hurriedly said, Big sister, do you still need a younger brother? Mu Niannian glanced at Wu Xian. In the next moment she waved her right hand. Bang! Wu Xian was directly thrown hundreds of feet away and finally fell heavily to the ground. Yixin, on the ground, Wu Xian wailed. Why is this? In the distance, the Lord of Underworld suddenly said, Fifth Dimension Tendo, is it worth it to do this for a human? Obviously he already knew Mu Niannian's identity. Mu Niannian looked at the Lord of Underworld. The Lord of Underworld said, You should know how powerful doubting is. Mu Niannian smiled and said, I don't care. There are actually very few things that I care about. There used to be only one, but now there is one more. One is the universe that I protect, and the other is this little guy. The Lord of Underworld said softly, I wish you good luck. After saying that, he slowly retreated. At this time the sky suddenly cracked open. The next moment, an extremely powerful aura suddenly swept out from the cracked space. Seeing this scene, Yixin's expression changed. He was about to get up when Mu Niannian suddenly said, Heal your injuries. Yixin looked at Mu Niannian. Mu Niannian picked up Yixin's soul-suppressing sword. She looked at Yixin and the corners of her mouth slightly raised. There are only 3 people who can kill Sister Nian. Unfortunately, all 3 of them are with you. Sister Nian is very cunning, right? Yixin did not laugh because he found that there was clearly something wrong with Mu Niannian's body. Her body was illusory. Yixin forcibly stood up and walked to Mu Niannian's side. Then she grabbed Mu Niannian's hand and grinned. Advance and retreat together, live and die together. Chapter 1326. Doubting. Yixin didn't know how strong doubting was, but he knew that it was definitely very strong, at least above the underworld. Sister Nian might be able to suppress the underworld, but she might not be able to suppress doubting. Especially when Sister Nian was still injured. But no matter what, this time the siblings would advance and retreat together, and they would live and die together. Hearing Yixin's words, Mu Niannian glanced at him but didn't say anything. At this moment, a middle-aged man suddenly appeared in the sky. He wore a dark white robe, and there was a domineering aura between his brows. In his hand he held a meter-long golden whip. The golden whip flickered with golden light, and one could tell that it wasn't an ordinary item at first glance. When this middle-aged man appeared, the gloomy aura of death around him actually retreated slowly, not daring to approach him. At this moment, Wu Xan walked to Yixin's side and said in a deep voice, This is one of the 4 great divine generals of doubting, Heng Tianwu. Yixin glanced at Wu Xan. There are 3 more? Wu Xian nodded. Yixin fell silent. Wu Xian said in a deep voice, This person isn't simple. It should be said that every divine general isn't simple, because they walked out of the purgatory of death step by step. Do you know about the purgatory of death? It's an extremely terrifying battlefield. Every once in a while the doubting and the Dao Tomb will fight there, and it's extremely tragic. It can be said that these divine generals have been fighting their entire lives. In their world it's all about fighting. Yixin raised his head to look at Heng Tianwu, and he suddenly realized why the gloomy aura of death didn't dare to approach him. Because Heng Tianwu had an extremely terrifying murderous aura. How many people would he have to kill to form such a murderous aura? In terms of temperament, this divine general was many times stronger than the 6th princess. Could Nian Yan defeat him? Yixin looked at Mu Niannian with a trace of worry in his eyes. In the sky, Heng Tianwu looked down at Mu Niannian and said, I never thought that a little Tendo could cultivate to this level. Mu Niannian laughed. You came alone? Heng Tianwu proudly smiled. Is it not enough? As soon as he finished speaking, the golden whip in his hand suddenly trembled violently. In an instant, a boundless golden light suddenly covered the entire sky. Under the golden light, the Yin Qi and Death Qi in the surroundings instantly disappeared without a trace. In the center of the golden light, Heng Tianwu held the golden whip with one hand and looked like a god of war. Below, Mu Niannian had his left hand behind his back and his right hand holding a sword. His expression was calm. Compared to Heng Tianwu, Mu Niannian was like a small boat in the raging waves. He seems so frail. In the sky, Heng Qianwu suddenly stomped his right foot on the ground. In an instant, that expanse of golden light had shrunk back into his body. In the next moment, he held the golden whip in his hand as he dived down with a savage expression. Die. When they saw Heng Qianwu diving down, the expressions of the experts from the underworld and the surroundings instantly changed. As Heng Qianwu dived down, the entire world was obliterated inch by inch, and if he was allowed to descend to the ground, then everything in an area of a few hundreds of thousands of kilometers would probably transform into nothingness. This attack was Heng Qianwu's strongest attack. He who'd come out from the purgatory of death wouldn't underestimate his enemy. Because not to mention underestimating his enemy, even a single mistake in that place would cause him to be consigned to eternal damnation. Moreover, he wouldn't underestimate this fifth-dimensional Tendo that stood before him. Because he was unable to discern Mu Nianyan's actual strength. But no matter how strong Mu Nianyan was, he had to attack with his full strength and not hold back in the slightest. Not far away, Yixin slowly clenched his fists tightly. This Heng Qianwu is countless times stronger than the sixth princess. Thick. Yixin looked at Mu Nianyan. Mu Nianyan's expression was calm in the distance, and the formidable pressure didn't affect her at all. When Heng Qianwu arrived 300 m above Mu Nianyan, the ground and the surroundings collapsed and sunk down. Meanwhile, Mu Nianyan attacked. Under the gazes of everyone, Mu Nianyan transformed into a ray of light that shot into the sky. This ray of light was fine like a strand of hair, and it was practically impossible to notice with the naked eye. A breath of time later. A light sound of something tearing resounded abruptly. At this moment, everyone was stunned. Mu Nianyan stood in the sky with her sword in hand, and Heng Qianwu descended slowly behind her. There was a strand of light between his brows. He'd been instantly annihilated. At this moment, all the experts of the nether dimension were dumbstruck. Yixin and Wu Xian were petrified on the spot. It ended just like that? It felt like the foreplay lasted for an hour, and the main event lasted for 3 breaths of time. On the other side of the sky, the Lord of the Nether Dimension stared fixedly at Mu Nianyan, who held a sword in his hand, and it was unknown what he was thinking. Nanzang pressed his palms together and silently chanted Buddha's name. At this moment, Ayin was looking at Mu Nianyan as well. She just stared at Mu Nianyan while the shock in her heart couldn't be any greater. She killed a divine general in an instant. Even if she was a Tao breaker, it was impossible for her to kill a divine general in an instant with such ease. But Mu Nianyan still hadn't broken through into the Tao. Exactly how strong is she? At this moment, that was the question in the hearts of everyone here, and it was the same question in Heng Qianwu's heart as well. That attack from before had instantly dispersed all his strength, and he didn't even have the chance to defend himself. An instant kill with a single attack. Even he hadn't imagined that he would be killed in an instant. After all, he'd used all his strength. Suddenly, a sword stabbed into the top of his head. The soul suppression sword. In the blink of an eye, the soul-suppressing sword had completely absorbed the remnant soul. In the sky, Mu Nianyan opened her palm, and Heng Qianwu's golden whip fell into her grasp. She sized it up before she tapped it with her finger, and then the golden whip descended in front of Yixin. Yixin didn't take the golden whip, and he gazed at Mu Nianyan instead. At this moment, Mu Nianyan's countenance was slightly pale and she was coughing. Mu Nianyan grinned when she noticed Yixin's gaze. "I'm fine." As she spoke, she turned around to glance at the Lord of the Nether Dimension, and then she smiled. "I'm injured now. Moreover, it's quite severe. Do you intend to lend a hand? That's a good opportunity." The Lord of the Nether Dimension gazed at Mu Nianyan in silence. Mu Nianyan roared with laughter. "Since you're not going to lend a hand, then we'll be leaving." As soon as she finished speaking, she gazed at Yixin. "Let's go." Yixin nodded, and then he picked up the golden whip and hurriedly followed by Mu Nianyan's side. As if he'd thought of something, he suddenly gazed at Wu Xian. "Why aren't you leaving? Do you want to stay and eat?" Wu Xian shuddered when he heard this, and he hurriedly followed them. At this moment, no one in the Nether Dimension dared to stop them. Right at this moment, Mu Nianyan suddenly stopped, and then she turned around to look at the Lord of the Nether Dimension and smiled. "Help me send a message to the doubting. Tell him to either send more or stronger forces next time." As soon as she finished speaking, she led Yixin and Wu Xian along as she vanished on the spot. The Lord of the Nether Dimension remained silent. Meanwhile, a voice suddenly resounded from his side. "I never expected that such an expert actually existed in the Yang Dimension." The person who spoke was Tao Lord Qingming. At this moment he felt very fortunate that he hadn't attacked just now, Otherwise he would be the one dead. Actually, he was very shocked because a divine general had been instantly killed just like that. It was an instant kill. He could accept it if he'd won, but it was an instant kill and it was completely different. Moreover, this divine general had experienced numerous battles, and both his combat awareness and strength were top-notch. However, he'd still been instantly killed. A single strike. After a long moment of silence, Qing Ming suddenly said, "I'm going to the Doubting." The Lord of the Nether Dimension suddenly said, "Will the Doubting continue sending forces?" Qing Ming spoke softly, "They definitely will. Because the identity of the sixth princess isn't simple at all. She isn't just the sixth princess of the Doubting." As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. The Lord of the Nether Dimension remained silent for a long time. Moon Yanyan didn't bring Yi Xian directly back to the fifth dimension, and they arrived at the intersection of the Yang Dimension and the Yang Dimension instead. Moon Yanyan glanced at the surroundings and said softly, "Come out." As soon as she finished speaking, a woman suddenly appeared in front of Moon Yanyan. It was Mu Sheng from the Dao world. Mu Sheng gazed at Moon Yanyan. "It was you who forcefully opened the path between the Yang Dimension and the Nether Dimension." Moon Yanyan suddenly said, "Ask the red spider lilies to come out." Yi Xian gazed at Moon Yanyan. "Big Sister Nyan?" Moon Yanyan smiled, "Don't worry, I just want to see them." Mu Sheng didn't speak. The corners of Moon Yanyan's mouth curled up slightly. "Do you want me to repeat myself?" Mu Sheng gazed at Moon Yanyan. Meanwhile, a ray of red light suddenly appeared, and then Manju and Xiahua appeared in front of Yi Xian. Both of them glanced at Moon Yanyan with fear in their eyes. Moon Yanyan walked over to them and she stared at them for a long time before she spoke softly, "Let's go." She turned around and left once she finished speaking. Yi Xian nodded lightly, and then he left with Wu Xan. Meanwhile, Manju spoke abruptly, "Young Master Yi." Yi Xian turned around and gazed at Manju. Manju hesitated for a moment before she said, "I'm sorry." Yi Xian smiled, "It's my own choice. Also, both of you should live well. Don't let this lifetime down." He turned around and left once he finished speaking. In next to no time, Yi Xian's group of 3 vanished into the distance. Xiahua suddenly said, "She tried to kill us just now." Manju nodded, "Because of us, young Master Yi offended the entire Doubting. This evil karma." Xiahua frowned slightly, "But why did she give up?" Manju shook her head, "I don't know." At the end of the horizon, Yi Xian walked over to Moon Yanyan's side. "Big Sister Nyan?" Moon Yanyan said softly, "I just wanted to see if you were tainted by the Doubting's karma because of yourself, or if it was done by someone else out of malice. Those 2 little girls were indeed treated unfairly. You saved them, half of it was because of me and the other half was because of your kindness." Speaking of this, she looked at Yi Xian and smiled, "You can't blame others for this. Speaking of which, you offended the entire Doubting because of these 2 sisters. Moreover, these 2 sisters won't bring you any benefits. Do you really think it's worth it?" Yi Xian thought for a moment, then said, "If people do things based on whether it's worth it or not, wouldn't it be too boring?" Moon Yanyan was stunned, then gently rubbed Yi Xian's head with her right hand. "Great kindness." At this time, her body suddenly became illusory. Yi Xian's face changed greatly. "Big Sister Nyan?" Moon Yanyan smiled lightly, "I won't die." Yi Xian grabbed Moon Yanyan's hand tightly. He said in a trembling voice, "I want to find Qing-er. Can you help me find Qing-er?" P.S. Thank you to all the readers who voted. Chapter 1327. Look for Qing-er. At this moment Yi Xian was afraid. He was afraid that Moon Yanyan would die. He had such a strong feeling. Moon Yanyan was injured to begin with. Her attack this time would definitely affect her quite a bit. Most importantly, Doubting would definitely not let this matter rest. The next time they come, the Doubting might not be a divine general. What would happen to Moon Yanyan then? Only when Qing-er arrived would they be able to deal with the Doubting. Moon Yanyan looked at the flustered Yi Xian and smiled. She said softly, "It's really fine. You have to believe me. As long as I don't want to die, it's really hard for me to die." Yi Xian shook her head. She held onto Moon Yanyan's hand tightly. "You're fooling me again. Sister Nyan, you're so powerful. Can you help me find Qing-er? To be honest, I don't want to fight anymore. I want Qing-er to kill the Doubting." Hearing this, Moon Yanyan shook her head and smiled. "You bastard." As she said this, she looked into the depths of space and said softly, "Not long ago I could still sense her, but now I can't sense her at all." Yi Xian was confused. Where did she go? Mu Niannian looked at Yi Xian. She cares about you so much. I believe that she would not leave you unless she had no other choice. She chose to leave because she wanted you to grow up on your own. Secondly, she had no choice but to leave. The cause of adversity on you is very complicated. It's so complicated that even someone as powerful as me can't do anything about it. Not only that, but it also backfired on me. Yi Xian said in a low voice, I've dragged you into this. Mu Niannian shook her head. I chose you. Just like how you saved those sisters. You saved them. Although you offended the doubting, it was your choice. And I chose you. Do you understand? Yi Xian looked at Mu Niannian and said, Sister Nian, you're not afraid of doubting, right? Mu Niannian smirked. I'm not afraid of anyone except your Qing. Yi Xian shook his head and laughed. Sister Nian, you're being mischievous again. Mu Niannian laughed heartily. At this time Wu Xen suddenly asked, Is that Qing very powerful? Yi Xian shrugged. I'm not that good. I'm on par with Qing. A 50-50 chance. Mu Niannian laughed. Yes, it's 50-50. With that, the two siblings disappeared into the horizon. In the same place, Heartless frowned slightly. 50-50. Why does it sound a little unreliable to me? Are you trying to fool me? After returning to the fifth dimension, Mu Niannian disappeared once again. Yi Xian knew that she must have gone to roast fish again. As for why Mu Niannian liked to eat fish, Yi Xian was also puzzled. Could it be that Sister Nian was a cat? Yi Xian returned to the fifth dimension hall. There was only Guan Yin in the hall. It was worth mentioning that Guan Yin had already reached solitary release. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, The fifth dimension calamity is coming. Are there any signs in the fifth dimension? Guan Yin shook her head. No. It's very calm. Yi Xian frowned slightly. That shouldn't be the case. Under normal circumstances, there would definitely be signs. Guan Yin said in a deep voice, Yes, this is also what I'm puzzled about. However, the fifth dimension is normal. It's just that the spiritual energy is not comparable to other places. Yi Xian was silent. Guan Yin suddenly said, I heard that you went to the underworld? Yi Xian nodded his head. Guan Yin said in a deep voice, You have the Tao scripture and 3 lives. The underworld will not let us go, right? Yi Xian smiled bitterly. Right now, it's not the underworld's problem but the doubting. I killed the 6th princess of the doubting, so our enemy is not only the underworld but also the doubting. Guan Yin, Yi Xian said in a soft voice, How many solitary release realm experts are there now? Guan Yin said in a deep voice, In the entire 5th dimension, there are a total of 12 true solitary release realm experts. 12? Yi Xian shook his head. It's still too little? Guan Yin nodded. I know, but there's no other way. To reach the true solitary release realm, just relying on the Tao scripture is not enough, you also need to have enough talent and strength. Yi Xian thought about it, then said, The overall strength of the 5th dimension should only be second to the underworld and the doubting, as well as the mysterious whirling world and the mysterious Tao tomb. I have several Tao scriptures, so I'm afraid I can't get along well with these forces. Guan Yin said, What are your plans? Yi Xian said in a soft voice, Not only do we have to face external threats, we also have to deal with the 5th dimension tribulation. Our situation is not good, you have to be mentally prepared. Guan Yin looked at Yi Xian and was silent, his expression solemn. Yi Xian suddenly said, I'm going to talk to Jiming. With that he stood up and left. Soon Yi Xian arrived at a small courtyard. This was Yi Jiming's courtyard. Yi Jiming sat on a stone bench, her hands resting on her cheeks, thinking about something. When she saw Yi Xian, she immediately sat up straight and returned to normal. Yi Xian said with a smile, Jiming? Yi Jiming said in a soft voice, Congratulations. Yi Xian was puzzled, What are you congratulating me for? Yi Jiming was expressionless, Congratulations for escaping from the underworld. Yi Xian said, You're not in a good mood? Yi Jiming looked at Yi Xian, That 6th princess was killed by Mu Niannian? Yi Xian nodded. Yi Jiming sighed, What a monstrous woman. Yi Xian said in a low voice, Do you know much about doubting? Yi Jiming said in a soft voice, Doubting is very strong, very strong. Of the 3,000 paths, at least 80% of the protectors are doubting. If not for the hindrance of the Tao tomb, doubting would be even stronger. Yi Xian said in a low voice, The Tao tomb? Yi Jiming nodded, That's where some Tao breakers stay. Their goal is to destroy doubting. Although they did not completely destroy the Tao court, countless great Taoists collapsed because of them. It can be said that they almost destroyed the entire Tao court back then. Yi Xian frowned, You said that you can't say anything about a place. Is it doubting or the Dao Tomb? Yi Jiming said, the Dao Tomb. But I can say it now. Yi Xian was puzzled. Why? Yi Jiming said in a low voice, because you did something they approved of. Yi Xian said in a low voice, killed the sixth princess? Yi Jiming nodded. Yi Xian said in a low voice, can I form an alliance with the Dao Tomb? Yi Jiming shook his head, you'd better not. Yi Xian was puzzled, why do you say that? Yi Jiming said, because of the Dao scripture. The Dao Tomb will not give up on the Dao scripture. Yi Xian said in a low voice, the Dao scripture is that powerful? They even want the doubting in the Dao Tomb? That shouldn't be the case. They already have experts who have surpassed the Dao vindication realm, why would they still want the Dao scripture? It doesn't make sense. Yi Jiming looked at Yi Xian, the Dao scripture has 9 scrolls. The first one can allow one to achieve true escape. The second one, karma, allows one to understand karma, know fortune and misfortune and turn misfortune into fortune. The third one allows one to understand the variables of the world, the rules of the Dao, and walk a path that belongs to them. That's how you got your sword transformation. The fourth one, fate, allows one to understand the Dao of fate, their own fate and the Dao's fate. This scroll allows one to understand the rules of the world, and this rule is a Dao law. Mastering this Dao law is equivalent to having one's foot out of the chessboard. Saying this, she paused, then said, do you know why there are so many Dao vindication experts in the underworld? Yi Xian said in a low voice, the fifth scroll is in the underworld? Yi Jiming nodded, the fifth scroll, Dao, is in the underworld. That Dao scripture can allow one to prove the Dao. After that, there are 4 more Dao scriptures, one of which is in the underworld, the legendary imperial Dao, which can be used to control the Dao. As for the remaining 3 Dao scriptures. Saying this, she looked at Yi Xian, do you know what will happen if the Dao scripture is complete? Yi Xian shook his head. Yi Jiming said, if the Dao scripture is complete, it is 9 into 1. The complete Dao scripture is the peak of martial arts, and the origin of the entire martial arts civilization. Be it the Saha world or the Dao Ting, their martial arts civilization originated from the Dao scripture. Most importantly, there is a peerless Dao scripture martial art among them. As for the Dao Tomb, although they chose their own Dao and chose Dao breakers, it doesn't mean they don't want the Dao scripture. Most importantly, they won't let the Dao scripture become one. Yi Xian was puzzled, why? Yi Jiming said, rumor has it that once the Dao scripture becomes one, there are no more Dao breakers in the world. Do you know why Dao breakers appeared later and more of them? Yi Xian frowned, because of the Dao scripture? Yi Jiming nodded, the Dao scripture is equivalent to the general outline of the 3,000 great Daos. The Dao scripture contains countless great Daos, as well as the universe's truth and variables. However, the Dao scripture is divided into 9, so the great Daos are not perfect. Following that, Dao breakers appeared. If the Dao scripture becomes one, the great Daos become perfect again, which is a fatal threat to Dao breakers. Therefore, Dao breakers won't let the Dao scripture become one. But you now have 4 Dao scriptures. To a certain extent, you're the one with the highest chance of fusing the Dao scripture into one. Once you do, then you'll be able to rule over the 3,000 great Daos. At that time, the 3,000 great Daos would be nothing before you, let alone the guardians of the 3,000 great Daos. As she spoke, she gazed at Yi Xian, the reason I'm following you is to gather all the Dao scriptures. Yi Xian spoke solemnly, what happens after I gather all the Dao scriptures? Yi Jiming fell silent. Yi Xian chuckled, it's fine if you don't want to tell me. You can tell me when you want to in the future. Yi Jiming glanced at Yi Xian and said, it's practically impossible to gather all the Dao scriptures. Because the Dao scripture itself is a scourge, and almost no one who obtains it comes to a good end. Even the underworld has lost countless experts in the past. According to what I know, the first lord of the underworld died mysteriously after obtaining 2 Dao scriptures. As she spoke, she took a deep breath. Later on, I discovered that the Dao scripture itself is a form of karma, the karma of the 3,000 great Daos. Practically no one can endure this karma. Except for you? Yi Xian frowned slightly. Meh. Yi Jiming gazed at Yi Xian, because your backing is truly too powerful. As she spoke, she paused for a moment before she continued, I reckon that the cause of disaster and the karma of the 3,000 great Daos is very aggrieved as well. Why did it encounter a second generation like you? Chapter 1328. In the courtyard, Yi Xian was shocked. 3,000 great Dao. Dao scripture. All this while he knew too little about Dao scripture. He never expected that this Tao scripture was equivalent to the general outline of the 3,000 great Tao. If he gathered all the Tao scripture, he could balance the 3,000 great Tao. If he gathered all the 3,000 great Tao, wouldn't he be able to defecate on Doubting's head? Yi Xian shook his head with a bitter smile. Gather all the Tao scripture? How difficult would that be? There was still the Tao scripture in the Tao tomb. Would they give it to him? Moreover, Doubting wouldn't give him the time to search for the Tao scripture. As if thinking of something, Yi Xian looked at Yi Jiming. Jiming, since you know so much, do you know who the owner of the Tao scripture is? The owner of the Tao scripture. If the Tao scripture itself was already so terrifying, then how terrifying must the owner who wrote it be? Unimaginable. Yi Jiming shook his head. I don't know, but I know that the Tao scripture came from the whirling world. Yi Xian asked, have you been to the whirling world? Yi Jiming shook his head. No. As far as I know, no one can go there. Yi Xian was confused. Why? Yi Jiming said, because the entrance to the whirling world is an ascension platform. To enter the whirling world, one must have the ascension platform. Ascension platform. Yi Xian whispered, that means, Jiming, you don't know much about that place? Yi Jiming nodded. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian asked, what about the Milky Way realm? Yi Jiming said, I know where that place is, but I can't go there. Yi Xian was confused. Why? Yi Jiming replied, there's a formation guarding that place and a very, very powerful one at that. Yi Xian said, as far as I know, the Prophet has been there. Yi Jiming nodded, the Prophet has been there, but I don't know how he got there. Yi Xian was silent. Yi Jiming said, your top priority now is to figure out how to deal with Doubting. Doubting won't let the matter rest now that a sixth princess and a divine general are dead, especially since you have the Tao scripture. Yi Xian shook his head. I don't understand. Why didn't they come to snatch the Tao scripture before, but after it fell into my hands, they all came to snatch it? Yi Jiming looked at Yi Xian. Did no one snatch the Prophet's scriptures? As for others, just look at that Buddhist. He's afraid of others knowing that he has Taoist scriptures. But what about you? Once you have the Tao scripture, tell the entire universe that you have it. Who else would they look for if not you? Yi Xian was speechless. Yi Jiming said sternly, don't joke around. Doubting isn't that simple. Besides, the underworld will not let this matter rest. Although the underworld can't do anything to Moon Yin, you have to understand that Moon Yin isn't in a good condition right now. Yi Xian said solemnly, Jiming, do you know what injuries Yin has suffered? Yi Jiming shook his head. I don't know. Yi Xian frowned. You don't know either? Yi Jiming nodded. She's very mysterious and she's always joking around. No one can guess what she's really thinking. Yi Xian fell silent. Yi Jiming was about to speak when a powerful soul aura suddenly burst out from Yi Xian's body. Both of them were stunned. Yi Jiming looked at Yi Xian. Yellow Springs holy water. Yi Xian nodded. He had almost forgotten about this. Moon Yin had given him all the Yellow Springs holy water. Previously, the Yellow Springs holy water had been healing his soul, and now that his soul had recovered, the Yellow Springs holy water actually began to strengthen his soul. Yi Jiming said solemnly, quickly sit down. Yi Xian nodded and sat cross-legged on the ground. Around him, a powerful soul aura surged out like a tide. Yi Jiming hurriedly said, suppress. Yi Xian said, I can't suppress it. Yi Jiming said solemnly, use that sword of yours. Yi Xian hurriedly took out the soul-suppressing sword. As soon as the soul-suppressing sword appeared, a wave of soul energy that was even stronger than the one Yi Xian emitted suddenly erupted from the battlefield. Boom. In an instant, a powerful soul aura shot up into the sky, piercing through the clouds. In an instant, the entire sky above the city turned pitch black. The entire Fifth Dimension Alliance was shocked. Countless experts looked over. In the courtyard, Yi Jiming's expression was somewhat ugly. Not only was Yi Xian unable to suppress the soul aura, the soul-suppressing sword was also unable to suppress it. The sword had absorbed too many powerful souls. The power was so strong that it had already lost control. As if thinking of something, Yi Jiming hurriedly turned to look at the sky. Sansheng, what are you looking at? Quickly come and help. A black light flashed and soon Sansheng appeared in front of Yi Jiming. Yi Jiming pointed at Yi Xian and the soul-suppressing sword. Help him suppress it. Dao Sansheng nodded and walked in front of Yi Xian, placing a hand on Yi Xian's head. Boom. Three powerful forces suddenly began to slowly suppress Yi Xian. Gradually, the soul aura within Yi Xian's body began to calm down, but the soul-suppressing sword's aura grew stronger and stronger. Sansheng looked at the soul-suppressing sword. opened his palm and lightly pressed it down. Boom. A powerful force suddenly shook San Sheng to the point that he was forced to retreat several hundred feet. A trace of shock flashed across Yi Jiming's eyes. San Sheng's strength could be said to be the strongest in the fifth dimension apart from Mu Niannian, but she was actually pushed back by this sword? As if thinking of something, Yi Jiming looked at Yi Xian. Your sword couldn't have absorbed the divine souls of the sixth princess and the heavenly general, right? Yi Xian nodded, yes. Not only that, but it also absorbed the souls of dozens of Dao validation experts from the underworld. Dozens of Dao validation expert souls. Yi Jiming inhaled a breath of cold air. You guys are really abnormal. This was too crazy. Dozens of Dao validation experts. Moreover, it had absorbed the souls of the sixth princess and the heavenly general. Both of them were at the legendary Dao defense realm. Yi Jiming looked at the soul-suppressing sword. This sword is going to defy the heavens. As she spoke, she looked at Yi Xian. Hurry up and suppress the divine soul energy in your body, then suppress this sword yourself. Yi Xian nodded and glanced at the soul-suppressing sword. The sword's aura was still crazily increasing. Previously in the underworld, with Mu Niannian's suppression, this sword could still remain calm, but at this moment, it was completely released. Yi Xian did not think too much about it and began to focus on absorbing the power of the Yellow Springs holy water in his body. He knew that if he completely absorbed the power of the Yellow Springs holy water, his divine soul would become abnormally powerful. About an hour later, the entire sky was covered in darkness, filled with the soul aura released by the soul-suppressing sword. At this moment, the soul-suppressing sword had reached an extremely terrifying level. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly stood up and clenched his right hand. In an instant, ripples appeared in the space around him. Soul energy. Right now, he could easily kill a self-release expert with just his soul. As if thinking of something, Yi Xian looked at the soul-suppressing sword in front of him and grabbed it. Boom. Yi Xian's body trembled violently. At this moment, he felt endless soul energy. What a powerful force. Yi Xian greedily took a deep breath. If he were to fight with the king of the underworld now, he was 100% confident that he could kill him head-on. Unfortunately, the king of the underworld had already been killed by Mu Niannian. Yi Xian raised his head and looked at the soul energy in the sky. He pointed his sword towards the sky. Withdraw. Boom. In an instant, countless soul energy swept down from the sky and surged towards him and the soul-suppressing sword. Just like that, one man and one sword crazily absorbed the soul energy. At the side, Yi Jiming's expression became somewhat strange. The current Yi Xian could be said to be the true nemesis of the underworld. Other than those top-notch experts, there was basically no one in the underworld who was a match for Yi Xian. This sword platform restrained the underworld. After a long time, the soul-suppressing sword and Yi Xian both calmed down. Yi Xian looked at Yi Jiming and asked excitedly, Yi Jiming, what level is this sword at? Yi Jiming said solemnly, at least the Dao validation realm. Yi Xian frowned slightly. It's still not at the Dao defense realm? Yi Jiming rolled his eyes at Yi Xian. The Dao defense realm. What are you thinking? Do you think you can reach the Dao defense realm just by absorbing the souls of two Dao defense realm experts? It's not like that. If you want to reach the Dao defense realm, you have to cultivate on your own. Also, don't underestimate the Dao validation realm. The sword in your hand is equivalent to a Dao validation realm expert. With it and you together, it's not as simple as 1 + 1. It can be said that if the two of you join forces, you can completely pose a fatal threat to a Dao defense realm expert. The Dao validation realm. Yi Xian was silent. If he were to fight the sixth princess with his sword, then he was very confident in his ability to kill the sixth princess. Of course, he wouldn't be able to win if he were to fight the divine general. The divine general had no weaknesses, but the sixth princess had a lot of weaknesses. Yi Xian sheathed the soul-suppressing sword and looked at Yi Jiming. He was about to speak when a powerful pressure suddenly appeared in the distant starry sky. Yi Xian's expression changed when he saw this, and he vanished on the spot in the next moment. In the field, Yi Jiming frowned. So fast? Dao Sanxing spoke solemnly, what a powerful aura. Yi Jiming nodded, it should be them. A ray of light flashed in the starry sky, and Yi Xian appeared by Mu Niannian's side in the next moment. An old man stood not too far away from Mu Niannian. The old man's hair and beard were all white, and he wore a spotless white robe. He held a white horsetail whisk in his hand. A sage-like demeanor. That was Yi Xian's first impression. The white-robed old man glanced at Yi Xian, then at Mu Niannian and smiled, I'm Bai Dizzy. Nice to meet you, miss. Mu Niannian smiled, Emperor Bai Xing, the leader of the Celestial Lords. It seems that the doubting thinks highly of us this time. The white-robed old man was surprised. Miss, you know who I am? Mu Niannian nodded. I know Dao Yi a little. The white-robed old man smiled. Miss, would you like to hear the Dao ancestors' conditions? Mu Niannian smiled. Tell me about it. The white-robed old man said, the Dao ancestor decrees that if you are willing to surrender and bring this little brother's head and scripture as a gift, you can let bygones be bygones. Mu Niannian laughed, then looked at Yi Xian. What do you think? Yi Xian looked at Bai Dizzy. I want to surrender too. Can you give me a chance? Bai Dizzy was taken aback, then shook his head. We don't accept people who don't have anything to eat. *CK. Yi Xian's face darkened. P.S. Asking for votes. Asking for votes. Chapter 1329. Freeloader. Yi Xian's face darkened. This is too much. Mu Niannian, on the other hand, burst into laughter. Bai Dizzy looked at Mu Niannian and smiled. Miss, it's not easy to cultivate to this point. If you join my doubting, you will surely reach a higher level. Mu Niannian smiled. What if I don't join? Bai Dizzy looked at Mu Niannian. Tens of thousands of years of cultivation will go up in smoke. Mu Niannian smiled. I'll be waiting. Bai Dizzy smiled. Miss, your strength is unparalleled, but you're still a person. Mu Niannian looked at Bai Dizzy and smiled. I'm used to being unrestrained. Bai Dizzy smiled. Understood. Having said that, he turned and disappeared into the horizon. Mu Niannian continued to roast fish. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, they won't give up, will they? Mu Niannian rolled her eyes at Yi Xian. Aren't you talking nonsense? Yi Xian asked, Sister Nian, how strong is doubting? Mu Niannian shook her head. I don't know. Yi Xian frowned. You don't know? Mu Niannian smiled. I haven't investigated. Yi Xian's face sank. Mu Niannian suddenly said, just do your own thing. Yi Xian nodded. All right. Having said that, he turned and left. Not long after Yi Xian left, Yi Jiming suddenly appeared. Yi Jiming looked at Mu Niannian. You're really not afraid of doubting. Mu Niannian smiled. What are you trying to say? Yi Jiming said, why are you so fearless? Is it because of self-confidence or something else? Mu Niannian stood up with the grilled fish in her hand. She looked up at the end of the starry sky. People of the big abyss, do you think this universe has an end? Yi Jiming shook his head. Even she did not know where the end of the universe was. Mu Niannian smiled. In this boundless universe, there are too many unknowns. What are you trying to say? Yi Jiming asked in a deep voice. Mu Niannian stretched his body and smiled. The universe is huge, but I'm not interested in exploring it. I should say that I lost interest a long time ago. As she spoke, she glanced at the starry sky around her and said softly, this is my home. You still haven't answered my question. Yi Jiming growled. Mu Niannian blinked. I've already answered. With that, she turned around and left. On the spot, Yi Jiming frowned slightly. The underworld. Bai Dizzy did not return to doubting directly. Instead, she went to the underworld. Inside the dark spirit hall, the Lord of the Underworld looked at Bai Dizzy in front of him. She didn't agree? Bai Dizzy nodded. The Lord of the Underworld said softly, as expected. How could a powerhouse like her surrender so easily? As he spoke, he looked at Bai Dizzy. You must have another purpose for this trip, right? Bai Dizzy nodded. I just wanted to see how strong she is. The Lord of the Underworld asked, can you tell? Bai Dizzy said softly, I can't tell. The Lord of the Underworld narrowed his eyes. Even you can't tell? Bai Dizzy nodded. The Lord of the Underworld was silent. Bai Dizzy smiled. Bai Dizzy chuckled. However, I have a new discovery. The Lord of the Underworld looked at Bai Dizzy. Bai Dizzy smiled and said, she is a fifth dimension Tendo. I found that her power seems to have some kind of connection with the fifth dimension universe. If I'm not wrong, her power may originate from that fifth dimension universe. As far as I know, this fifth dimension universe is about to experience a disaster. This is the best time for us to kill her. The Lord of the Underworld frowned slightly. Us. Bai Dizzy looked at the Lord of the Underworld and smiled. Does the Underworld not want that Dao stone anymore? The Lord of the Underworld was silent. Bai Dizzy said again, dozens of powerhouses of the Underworld were killed. Does the Underworld not want to take revenge? The Lord of the Underworld smiled. Of course I want to take revenge. However, if the price is too high, what's the point of taking revenge? Bai Dizzy chuckled. The Lord of the Underworld should know the position of the sixth princess in the doubting. That woman not only killed the sixth princess, but also absorbed her soul. This is equivalent to stepping on the face of the doubting. I the doubting will not let this go. If the Tao ancestor and the others were not restrained by the Tao tomb, it would not be this old man who came this time. The Lord of the Underworld was silent. Bai Dizzy suddenly smiled. If you can absorb that Tao stone, the Lord of the Underworld narrowed his eyes. After a long silence, he said softly, this matter needs to be considered at length. Bai Dizzy nodded. Of course. The fifth dimension universe. In the room, Yi Xian was looking at an ancient book. This was left for him by the prophet. In this ancient book, it was all the ideas of the prophet to govern the world. The prophet's idea was very simple. The universe coexisted with all living things. In order to achieve this, humans and the other races had to control themselves. They could not wantonly destroy the spiritual qi of this world. Not only that, but they also had to protect the spiritual qi of this world and all kinds of spiritual objects. Simply put, it was like the sixth dimension universe. However, it was very difficult for the fifth dimension universe to be like the sixth dimension universe. This was because the sixth dimension universe was equivalent to giving up the opportunity for most people to ascend. The current fifth dimension universe definitely could not do this. Those people had already cultivated to a certain level. If you asked them to suddenly give up their cultivation, how could they be willing? The prophet's idea was very simple. There could be no construction without destruction. After the fifth dimension calamity, countless creatures in this universe would die tragically. At that time, this universe could be reborn. Yi Xian suddenly put down the ancient book and looked up at the starry sky. Did Sister Nian also have the same idea? In the room, Yi Xian did not speak for a long time. After a while, Yi Xian walked out of the main hall. He looked at the city. There were more and more experts in the fifth dimension universe now. The entire fifth dimension universe was very excited. This was because everyone's strength had increased. At this moment, Yi Xian already saw the drawbacks. The increasing number of experts was actually not a particularly good thing for this universe. This was because this universe could not withstand so many powerful people. After pondering for a long time, Yi Xian suddenly laughed. I was stupid. Why did I see these experts as a burden? After saying this, he shook his head and laughed. Then he disappeared. In the starry sky, Yi Xian found Mu Niannian. Mu Niannian glanced at the ancient book in Yi Xian's hands. The prophet. Yi Xian nodded. I finished reading it. His idea was the same as Sister Nian's, right? Mu Niannian nodded. In fact, he was originally the person I wanted to choose. However, his ambition was too big. Moreover, he did not listen to my advice, so he is gone. Yi Xian, Mu Niannian looked down and softly said, the current strength of the fifth dimension universe is unprecedentedly powerful. Have you ever thought about what would happen if these experts survived the fifth dimension tribulation? At that time, these experts will become a burden to the fifth dimension universe. Their existence will still accelerate the destruction of the fifth dimension tribulation. In other words, there will be another fifth dimension tribulation and the one after that. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, Sister Nian and the prophet's idea is to use the fifth dimension tribulation to eliminate the majority of people? Mu Niannian laughed. I didn't think about it that much. However, the prophet indeed had this idea. After saying this, she glanced at Yi Xian. Do you have any other ideas? Yi Xian nodded. I have an idea. I want to hear Sister Nian's opinion. Mu Niannian said, tell me about it. Yi Xian pointed down. If these experts stay here, they will become a burden to this universe. But what if they leave? Mu Niannian blinked. Yi Xian nodded. Once the fifth dimension tribulation ends, I will let the top experts of this universe leave the fifth dimension and let them develop outside. However, I want to tell them that the fifth dimension is their home. No matter where they go, the fifth dimension will still be their home. This way, these people will not be a burden to the fifth dimension, but a super external aid to the fifth dimension. As long as the fifth dimension tribulation is in trouble, these people will come back from all directions. Mu Niannian laughed. Why would they come back? Yi Xian smiled proudly. Tao scripture. After I let them leave, I will tell them that as long as they reach a certain level, they can come back to the fifth dimension. Then I will use Tao scripture to help them break through. This way, who wouldn't treat the fifth dimension as their home? Mu Niannian looked at Yi Xian. After a moment, she faintly smiled. Genius. Benefits. The only thing that could tie down these super experts was benefits. Just like the reason why the fifth dimension was unprecedentedly united. Even the Tao world had joined the fifth dimension. What? Because of benefits. Tao scripture was benefits. For the Tao scripture, all the top experts were willing to unite. Similarly, for the Tao scripture, these super experts were also willing to treat the fifth dimension as their home and protect it. Yi Xian continued, "Of course I won't help them break through for free. I will ask them to help me look for those spiritual beings in the universe after they leave. I will ask them to trick those spiritual beings back to our five-dimensional universe. In other words, if the fifth dimension is good, then everyone is good." Mu Nianyan looked at Yi Xian and smiled. "You can do it." Yi Xian smiled. "I will definitely do it." After saying this, he looked down and smiled. "Sister Nian, it will be very tiring for you to protect the entire universe by yourself. However, if all the living beings in the fifth dimension come together to protect it, then you can relax. The universe is so big. At that time you will be able to look around. At the same time you can also trick a few spirits back." Mu Nianyan laughed heartily. She laughed very loudly and laughed very happily. Yi Xian looked at Mu Nianyan and did not say anything. After a long time, Mu Nianyan looked at Yi Xian and smiled. "The universe is so big. We can look around. This idea is very tempting." Yi Xian smiled. "I also want to look around." Mu Nianyan suddenly pulled Yi Xian's hand and smiled. "Accompany Sister Nian for a walk and chat." Yi Xian blinked. "Is there any benefit?" Mu Nianyan also blinked. "I heard that your body is very hard. Do you want to try Sister Nian's fist? Don't worry, Sister Nian will kill you with one punch. You won't have to suffer any physical pain." Yi Xian was speechless. Chapter 1330. In the starry sky, Yi Xian and Mu Nianyan were walking slowly. The two were simply chatting. In fact, most of the time it was Mu Nianyan who was talking. Mu Nianyan and Yi Xian talked about some secret and interesting things about the five-dimensional universe from the early days of its birth to the present, including how she started cultivating. Yi Xian listened with great interest. Mu Nianyan's life was actually very legendary. It must be known that she was just an ordinary Tendo at that time, the target of the five-dimensional universe's defiance. The two of them chatted for half a day. After Yi Xian and Mu Nianyan parted, he returned to his room. He opened his palm and the book appeared in his hand. This was the book left behind by the prophet. And just now, Sister Nian had given him this book. With his current strength he could already open it. Yi Xian took out the prison pagoda and looked at the book. "If you tell this father that your strength is not enough, this father will beat you to death." After saying that, he pointed with his fingers and the prison pagoda directly entered the book. There was a moment of silence. Boom. A powerful aura suddenly erupted from the book. Soon a white light suddenly gushed out. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before walking into the white light. After entering the white light, Yi Xian came to a book. He was surrounded by bookshelves, and these bookshelves were filled with all kinds of ancient books. This was the book? Yi Xian looked around. At this time he saw a desk not far in front of him. On the desk there was a scroll. Yi Xian walked to the desk and picked up the scroll. Tao Scripture. Escape scroll. Yi Xian opened the scroll, and familiar words appeared in front of his eyes. 50 Great Taos, 49 Heavenly Divination. Escape scroll. Yi Xian put away the escape scroll and looked around. Didn't the prophet say that there was something dangerous here? How could it not be? Right at this moment, a certain bookshelf suddenly started trembling. Yi Xian looked at the bookshelf and sized it up before he said, "Are you coming out?" At this moment, the bookcase suddenly split open and a small gourd floated out. Yi Xian looked at the small gourd and was secretly on guard. The prophet had said that it was very dangerous. After the small gourd swayed for a while, a voice suddenly came from within. "You are a prophet." "No, you're not." The voice was a little childish and it was hard to tell if it was a man or a woman. Yi Xian blinked. "Who are you?" The little gourd said, "I am the great gourd deity." "Immortal gourd?" Yi Xian frowned. "I've never heard of it." "Ignorant." The voice shouted angrily, "I am the #1 divine artifact of Saha world, the heaven and earth gourd, the whirling world." Yi Xian's eyelids twitched. Damn it. This was a trap. This was Yi Xian's first impression. How did I provoke the underworld? It's the 3 lives. The 3 lives is the #1 divine artifact of the underworld. And now this heaven and earth gourd? The #1 divine artifact of Saha world? Damn it. Am I going to go against the whirling world again? What the hell? I don't want to. Yi Xian hurriedly said, "Great gourd deity, why are you here?" Great gourd deity said coldly, "The prophet said that this world is fun and he brought me out." The prophet tricked me. The corners of Yi Xian's mouth twitched. He hesitated for a moment and said, The prophet is gone. The gourd immortal said, I know. He was taken by a very, very powerful woman. He was killed by a very powerful woman. Chinga. Yishen's eyelids twitched. How do you know? Great gourd deity said, I was beaten up by that woman. Yishen, great gourd deity said, you were beaten up really badly. Yishen's expression became slightly strange. You couldn't defeat that woman? Great gourd deity said angrily, how could I not defeat her? Yishen blinked. You could? Great gourd deity said after a moment of silence, I was evenly matched with her. Yishen, great gourd deity said, you should know that I was very weak back then because I had just broken the enchantment of the whirling world. I was not at my peak. If I was at my peak, to put it bluntly, that woman wouldn't even have the chance to draw her sword. Yishen's expression was calm. Great gourd deity was not just bluntly arrogant, it was extremely arrogant. Great gourd deity suddenly jumped up and down. I'm free now. I'll follow you from now on. Yishen's eyelids twitched. Why do you want to follow me? Great gourd deity said, who else would I follow if not you? Yishen hesitated for a moment and said, why don't you go back? In fact, he really wanted to say, don't King bring the whirling world here. I really can't take it anymore. Great gourd deity suddenly jumped up. I'm not going back. I'm not going back. Yishen frowned. Why? Great gourd deity said angrily, it's not fun to go back. Yishen thought for a moment and said, why don't you go play on the doubting? Great gourd deity was curious. What is doubting? Yishen said seriously, it's a very fun place. Great gourd deity suddenly jumped in front of Yishen. Human, do you not want me to follow you? Yishen spread his hands. There's no point in you following me. I don't play often. Besides, I have a lot of enemies. It's very dangerous. Very dangerous? Great gourd deity said excitedly, danger is good. Danger is fun. I want to follow you. Yishen almost fainted. Great gourd deity said again, human, did you know that it was the prophet who begged me to follow him? Yishen thought for a moment and said, why did the prophet ask you to follow him? Or rather, did he ask you to do anything? Great gourd deity said, he asked me to play with him. Yishen said in a low voice, are you good at fighting? Great gourd deity said angrily, of course I am. Let me tell you, other than that woman in a plain dress, there's no one that I'm afraid of. Yishen blinked. How so? Great gourd deity suddenly said, heaven and earth are infinite, and the power of the universe is born from the heart. The Lord of Tai, as urgent as the law, withdraw. A powerful force suddenly enveloped Yishen, and in the next instant Yishen disappeared on the spot. In the blink of an eye Yishen appeared in the gourd. Yishen glanced at the surroundings and his brows knit together slightly. He was about to speak when his body actually started to melt bit by bit. Yishen's expression instantly changed when he witnessed this scene, and he hurriedly activated the Buddha invincible physique. However, it was actually useless and his body was still melting incessantly. Yishen's face fell, and then he withdrew the executing heaven sword and slashed it forward. A ray of light flashed. However, it wasn't even able to strike the bottle gourd before it was melted away. Yishen's expression instantly changed when he witnessed this scene. What gourd is that? It's actually able to melt my sword energy. Meanwhile, great gourd deity's voice suddenly resounded. A voice suddenly rang out. Do you have any other moves? Yishen thought for a moment, and then he suddenly clenched his fists. In an instant, a strand of formidable energy started to converge around him. A Taoist scripture and martial technique. However, he noticed to his astonishment that the energy started to melt as soon as it converged. At this moment Yishen was truly shocked. That gourd is terrifying. It can even melt the energy of a Tao scripture. How could it be so heaven-defying? Meanwhile, Immortal Gourd chuckled, do you have any other moves? Yishen thought for a moment, and then the seal of a god suddenly appeared between his brows. In the next moment his aura suddenly rose explosively. Bang! In an instant Yishen had attained the Tao verification realm. After he attained the Tao verification realm, he opened his palm, and the executing heaven sword appeared in his grasp once more. He slashed with it. A strand of sword energy tore through the sky. This time it didn't vanish and it struck the gourd instead. However, the gourd was completely unharmed. Yishen thought for a moment, and then he suddenly clenched his fists. In an instant, a strand of formidable energy suddenly converged. After he attained the Tao verification realm, the might of this technique could be said to have multiplied. This time, Although the power of the Tao scripture martial arts was also slowly melting, the speed of melting was much slower. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian suddenly slashed forward. Rumble. A powerful force suddenly erupted from the gourd, and in an instant the entire gourd trembled violently. However, after around 10 minutes, the gourd returned to its original calm state, and the energy of the technique within the gourd had completely melted away. Within the gourd, Yi Xian fell silent and he was extremely shocked. Damn it, this gourd is too heaven-defying. That move of his just now could directly destroy a small world. But this gourd is completely unharmed. Isn't that too terrifying? At this moment, Immortal Gourd suddenly chuckled. So long as you enter this place, no matter how strong your opponent is, they will slowly melt into a pool of blood. Yi Xian said, so long as you don't enter it, it'll be fine, right? Immortal Gourd said, yes. Yi Xian understood now. Fighting against this gourd, one cannot enter it. When the gourd was chanting, he could actually resist its energy. So long as he didn't enter it, the gourd couldn't do anything to him. But if he entered it, then he couldn't do anything to the gourd and he could only wait for death. At this moment, Yi Xian seemed to have thought of something and he opened his palm. In next to no time, the blood within his body started to boil, and then a powerful bloodline energy appeared around him. But Yi Xian noticed that the gourd wasn't able to melt away his bloodline energy. The corners of Yi Xian's mouth curled up slightly when he saw this. It seems like not everything can be melted away by this gourd. But even so, it's still very heaven-defying. Meanwhile, Immortal Gourd suddenly said, your bloodline energy is so strong. Yi Xian laughed and said, Immortal Gourd, I'll take you to see someone. Immortal Gourd asked, who? Yi Xian blinked, you'll know when you get there. A moment later, Yi Xian left the study with the Great Gourd Immortal. Then he brought the Great Gourd Immortal to Mu Niannian. When they saw Immortal Gourd, Mu Niannian looked at Yi Xian, from the whirling world? Yi Xian nodded. Mu Niannian suddenly clutched her chest. Yi Xian quickly asked, Sister Nian, what's wrong? Sister Nian shook her head, my chest hurts. Yi Xian was puzzled, why does your chest suddenly hurt? Mu Niannian looked at Yi Xian, I'm angry. Yi Xian. Chapter 1331. In the starry sky, Mu Niannian glanced at Yi Xian and sighed. I didn't expect you to be involved with the whirling world again. Yi Xian smiled. Sister Nian, this gourd is very powerful. Mu Niannian glanced at the gourd in Yi Xian's hand. The Qingquan gourd. Yi Xian blinked. Sister Nian knows it? Mu Niannian sized up the gourd. How did you escape from the whirling world? Gourd Immortal snorted. Who are you? Why should I answer you? Yi Xian. At this moment, Mu Niannian suddenly disappeared. Gourd Immortal suddenly laughed. How dare you come in? This great immortal will let you see. Meanwhile, numerous shrill and miserable cries suddenly resounded. The gourd trembled violently in the starry sky. Yi Xian knew that the gourd had been hammered. After a long time, the gourd completely withered. At this moment, Mu Niannian appeared beside Yi Xian and clapped her hands. You're asking for a beating? Gourd Immortal trembled. Oh, who are you? Mu Niannian said indifferently, how did you escape? Gourd Immortal asked again, woman, who are you? Mu Niannian smiled and rubbed her hands. Do you want to be beaten again? Gourd Immortal hurriedly said, I sneaked out. Mu Niannian fell silent. Yi Xian looked at Mu Niannian. Should I send it back? Gourd Immortal hurriedly said, no. Brother, don't send me back. I'll follow you, okay? Yi Xian, Mu Niannian suddenly said softly, forget it. Let it follow you. It will be very useful to you in the short term. Yi Xian hesitated, then said, whirling world? Mu Niannian chuckled. Since it's delivered to my doorstep, it would be a waste not to take it. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. I'm afraid that the Saha world will come and beat me up. Mu Niannian looked at Yi Xian. What will come will come. Yi Xian was speechless. Mu Niannian suddenly looked up at the sky and said softly, doubting should be moving soon. You have to be mentally prepared. Yi Xian looked up at the depths of the starry sky. How would doubting deal with the five-dimensional universe this time? If it was him, how would he deal with the five-dimensional universe? As if he had thought of something, Yi Xian suddenly said, Sister Nian, let's chat another day. With that, he turned around and disappeared below. Mu Niannian glanced at Yi Xian, who had disappeared from his sight, and shook his head with a smile. Little guy. Yi Xian returned to the five-dimensional hall. He looked for Guan Yin and Senior Sister Lu of the Sword Sect. Yi Xian looked at the two of them. Guan Yin, Senior Sister Lu, I have something I need you to do. Guanyin was curious. What is it? Yixian also called Xiaolinger out and said in a deep voice. Find the sword sect. Sword sect? Guanyin frowned slightly. What do you mean? Senior Sister Lu also looked at Yixian. She was puzzled. Yixian smiled. I came here from the lower world and have seen many sword sect. The founder of these sword sect is the same person, the man in green robe. Senior Sister Lu suddenly said. I know. It was founded by some of his fellow disciples. Some of them survived, but some have disappeared in the long river of history. Yixian nodded. There must be other relics of the sword sect. Senior Sister Lu said in a deep voice. What do you want to do? Yixian said. Find the box. Box. Hearing these two words, Xiaolinger's eyes suddenly lit up. Senior Sister Lu looked at Yixian. That little guy's box. Yixian nodded. According to my guess, that little guy is very playful. So, she must have left a box somewhere else, and that box will be of great help to us. Guanyin was a little confused, but Senior Sister Lu was very clear on what was going on. The box left by the white little guy was not ordinary. Senior Sister Lu said after a moment of silence. I know of a sword sect relic. Hearing this, Yixian was a little excited. Come, let's go. Senior Sister Lu nodded. Yixian gazed at Guanyin. Send someone to search throughout the entire fifth dimension. Don't let go of those minor worlds and remote worlds. Notify me immediately if you find any relics of the sword sect. Guanyin nodded. All right. I'll do it right away. As soon as she finished speaking, she turned around and left. It didn't take long for countless experts to start searching for the relics of the sword sect throughout the fifth dimension. After Guanyin left, Yixian suddenly gazed at Senior Sister Lu and said, Senior Sister Lu, help me look at something. As soon as he finished speaking, he waved his right hand, and an ice coffin suddenly appeared here. Senior Sister Lu frowned slightly. What's that? Yixian spoke in a low voice. A mysterious senior gave it to me. He said that the green-clothed man asked him to protect it, and he gave it to me when the time came. Senior Sister Lu gazed at Yixian. He left it behind? Yixian nodded. Do you know who's in the coffin? Senior Sister Lu asked. Can I open it? Yixian shook his head. No, there's a powerful sword energy within the coffin. Moreover, opening it like this isn't particularly respectful to the person within the coffin. Actually, he wasn't afraid of the sword energy because the sword spirit was there. However, opening it like this was too abrupt. Senior Sister Lu gazed at the coffin for a long time before she spoke softly. I think I know who it is. Yixian hurriedly asked. Who? Senior Sister Lu glanced at Yixian. You'll know when the time comes. Yixian was speechless. Senior Sister Lu said, protect this coffin well. Your family owes it to them. Yixian frowned slightly. My family? Senior Sister Lu spoke indifferently. In any case, it's a form of karma. Just protect it well. Yixian was speechless. Senior Sister Lu also liked to whet his appetite. As if thinking of something, Yixian took out a token. This was given to him by the mysterious powerhouse in the land of origin, who said that he could do him a favor. When he was in the underworld, he wanted to use this token. However, he didn't choose to use it in the end because at that time, even if he called a Tao validation powerhouse, it would be useless. According to his guess, that mysterious powerhouse should be a Tao validation powerhouse. Now he needed to use all the power he could to fight against doubting. At this moment, Senior Sister Lu suddenly said, let's go to the sword sect ruins. Yixian nodded. He put away the ice coffin and disappeared from the hall with Senior Sister Lu. In the vast starry sky, Yixian and Senior Sister Lu flew on their swords. Yixian suddenly said, Senior Sister Lu, can you contact the founder of the sword sect? Senior Sister Lu shook her head. I can't. Yixian was silent. Senior Sister Lu smiled. You don't have the confidence to face it yourself? Yixian said softly, the world is difficult. I don't want to struggle anymore. Senior Sister Lu, Yixian suddenly smiled. Senior Sister Lu, other forces can summon their founder. Why can't the sword sect do the same? Senior Sister Lu smiled. They already did it once. Yixian was silent. He knew it was the woman with the spear. Senior Sister Lu suddenly said, can you reach the Tao validation realm? Yixian shook his head. He still couldn't reach the Tao validation realm. He could only rely on the God Seal to reach the Tao validation realm. And this borrowed power was still inferior to the power he cultivated. But he also knew that this matter couldn't be rushed. Without thinking too much, Yi Xian and senior sister Lu sped up. In the fifth dimension. In the courtyard, Yi Jiming, who was reading a book, suddenly stopped. She turned her head and saw a man standing not far away. Yi Jiming said calmly, "Bengsu, you are quite patient. You only came out now." The man named Bengsu walked to Yi Jiming's side and said in a deep voice, "The patriarch has ordered us to bring you back." Yi Jiming said softly, "Bengsu, you have followed me for so long. You should have some understanding of young Master Yi, right?" Bengsu said in a deep voice, "That young Master Yi is a genius, rare in the world." Yi Jiming looked at Bengsu. "Go back and tell him that I won't go back." Bengsu hesitated for a moment and said, "The patriarch has said, dead or alive." "Dead or alive?" Yi Jiming sneered. "Dead or alive? It seems that the Tao scriptures are always more important to him than the people around him." Speaking of this, she suddenly thought of Yi Xian. She thought of the scene when Yi Xian gave her 2 Tao scriptures in the netherworld. Her biological father couldn't be compared to a man she had only known for a few months. 2 Tao scriptures. If they were in De Yuan, her father would have been willing to sacrifice the entire clan. What about Yi Xian? Thinking of Yi Xian, Yi Jiming suddenly shook her head and smiled. At this moment, her heart felt warm. Bengsu sighed softly. "Sorry." With that, he was about to attack when a woman suddenly appeared behind him. It was Sansheng. Seeing Sansheng, Bengsu's expression changed drastically. Sansheng looked at Bengsu. "You want to fight?" Bengsu looked at Sansheng with fear in his eyes. Sansheng looked at Yi Jiming not far away. "He told me that someone might be looking for trouble with you. I didn't believe it at first, but I didn't expect it to be true." At this moment, a sword light suddenly appeared in the field. It was Arrow. Arrow looked at Bengsu in the distance. He said that Jiming is his friend. Knowing Destiny is his friend, so no one can make trouble for her. Bengsu was silent. Arrow continued. "He also said that he won't kill you this time. He asked you to go back and tell De Yuan that if Jiming doesn't want to go back, De Yuan shouldn't force her to go back." Bengsu glanced at Yi Jiming not far away and turned to leave. He knew that with these 2 women around, he couldn't take Yi Jiming away. After Bengsu left, Yi Jiming looked at Arrow and 30. "Did he ask you to protect me in secret?" Arrow nodded. Yi Jiming was silent. No one knew what he was thinking. Somewhere in the distant starry sky, 2 sword lights streaked across the starry sky like meteors, bright and dazzling. About half an hour later, senior sister Lu suddenly stopped. She looked into the distance and said softly, "There's a sword sect relic in front." Yi Xian looked into the distance and said softly, "I hope she buried the box, senior sister Lu. P.S. On the last day of this month, vote for those with guaranteed monthly votes." Chapter 1332. In front of Yi Xian and senior sister Lu was an endless mountain range, and in the depths of the mountain range several palaces could be vaguely seen. At this moment Yi Xian also sensed the sword intent. And it was a very strong sword intent. Yi Xian asked softly, "Senior sister Lu, what is this sword sect?" Senior sister Lu answered softly, "It was founded by one of his senior brothers. Let's go and have a look." Yi Xian nodded. Soon they came to a mountain gate. The gate was several meters wide and there were 2 big black words on the gate, "Sword Sect." The words were bold and powerful as if they were carved by a sharp sword. Behind the gate was a Xiaodao with endless stone steps. Yi Xian and senior sister Lu slowly walked up the stone steps to the Xiaodao. The Xiaodao was deserted and the weeds on both sides were several meters high. Obviously no one had been here for a long time. Yi Xian asked softly, "Why is it so deserted?" Senior sister Lu looked around and her eyes flickered. "They should be dead." Yi Xian was silent. There were no traces of fighting here, which meant that the people here were either dead or had left. Soon the 2 of them arrived before a large hall. In front of the palace was a huge stone statue of the green-robed man, and on his shoulder was the little white guy. Yi Xian quickly called Xiaolinger out. Xiaolinger sniffed and walked to the statue of the green-robed man. She lightly stamped the ground with her little feet, and after a while she turned to look at Yi Xian and shook her head. Yi Xian asked softly, "No?" Senior sister Lu suddenly said, "Maybe he has never been here." Looking at the disappointed Xiaolinger, Yi Xian smiled. "It's okay, we will definitely meet him in the future." Xiaolinger quickly nodded. Yi Xian looked at senior sister Lu. "Let's go." Senior sister Lu nodded slightly, and the 2 of them were about to leave. However, at this moment, the sound of a sword suddenly rang out from the hall behind them. Both of them stopped. Yishan turned around and a voice suddenly rang out in the hall. A familiar aura. Sect Master? His voice was trembling and it was obvious that he was very excited. Sect Leader? Yishan looked at Senior Sister Lu, who said softly, "Let's go in and take a look." Yishan nodded. The two of them walked into the Great Hall. In the Great Hall, a sword floated in the air and the voice came from the sword. When the two of them walked into the main hall, the voice sounded again. "You are not the sect leader." Yishan sized up the sword and said, "You are?" The man suddenly said, "Your bloodline?" At this time, Senior Sister Lu suddenly asked, "Who are you?" The sword trembled and turned into a middle-aged man. Senior Sister Lu looked at the middle-aged man. "I don't know you." She basically knew all the people around him. Of course, except for some women. The middle-aged man glanced at Senior Sister Lu and said, "I'm the sect leader of this sword sect." Senior Sister Lu said, "Who's the founding ancestor of your sword sect?" When she spoke up to this point, she seemed to have thought of something and said, "I mean the one who founded this sword sect." The middle-aged man spoke in a low voice, "You mean the founding ancestor Tingyun?" Tingyun. Senior Sister Lu was slightly stunned, and then she said softly, "So it's her." Yishan looked at Senior Sister Lu. "You know her?" Senior Sister Lu nodded. "She's the strongest in the sword Dao besides him in the sword sect, and her talent is the highest as well." As she spoke, she looked at the middle-aged man. "Why has this sword sect become like this?" The middle-aged man smiled bitterly. "We've encountered a calamity." Senior Sister Lu frowned slightly. "Calamity?" The middle-aged man nodded. "In the past, our sword sect had a sacred artifact called sword scripture. It was left behind by the founding ancestor. But since founding ancestor Tingyun left, the doubting coveted it. In the end, Senior Sister Lu's eyes narrowed slightly. The doubting seized the sword scripture? The middle-aged man nodded. The doubting didn't dare to touch it when founding ancestor Tingyun was here. But after founding ancestor Tingyun left, the doubting immediately sent someone to seize the sword scripture. Senior Sister Lu's expression was cold. They actually dared to seize the sword scripture. How audacious of them. The middle-aged man sighed in a low voice. "We're useless. If founding ancestor Tingyun was here." Senior Sister Lu looked at the middle-aged man. "Where's Tingyun?" The middle-aged man said in a low voice, "Founding ancestor Tingyun left. As for where he went, I don't know." Senior Sister Lu said softly, "That little girl should have gone to find him." Little girl. The middle-aged man's expression became slightly strange. "You are?" Yishan quickly said, "She's Senior Sister Lu, also from the sword sect." The middle-aged man was a little surprised. "You're also from the sword sect?" Senior Sister Lu nodded. The middle-aged man cupped his fist. "Oh, you're from the same sect." Senior Sister Lu pointed at the green-robed man's statue outside the hall. "Has he been here before?" The middle-aged man said, "Yes, he seemed to have come to see founding ancestor Tingyun." Senior Sister Lu asked again, "Did he leave anything behind?" The middle-aged man thought for a while and then shook his head. "I don't think so." Senior Sister Lu was silent. Yishan smiled. "Since he didn't leave anything behind, then forget it." At this time, the middle-aged man suddenly said, "But a little white guy did leave a box behind." "A box?" Yishan and Senior Sister Lu were stunned. "There's a box." Senior Sister Lu said in a low voice, "Where is it?" The middle-aged man turned around and pointed at the table in front of him, and there was a small box on the table. The middle-aged man said, "Tingyun said that this box was a gift from that little white guy and he asked us to keep it well. Then our sword sect put it up for worship." Yishan and Senior Sister Lu were speechless. They even put it up for worship. Yishan hesitated for a moment and then said, "Didn't you open this box during the sword sect's calamity?" The middle-aged man shook his head. "No." As he spoke, he looked at the box. "Is there something special about this box?" Yishan and Senior Sister Lu exchanged glances and both were speechless. Senior Sister Lu suddenly said, "Doubting, if you open this box when someone comes, then you might have a chance to survive." The middle-aged man was astonished. "This? How is this possible? As far as I know, that little white guy isn't very strong." Senior Sister Lu shook her head. "She isn't very good at fighting, but she can call for help." "Call for help? Who has the most backing?" "It's definitely Little White. A very, very long time ago, no one dared to offend this little white guy, because offending her was equivalent to poking a hornet's nest." The middle-aged man glanced at the box and smiled bitterly. "No wonder Ancestor Tingyun asked us to keep it well all those years ago. But none of us took it seriously." Yi Xian hesitated for a moment and then said, "Can you give this box to me?" Senior Sister Lu rolled her eyes at Yi Xian. This guy's face is really thick and he's asking for it directly. The middle-aged man smiled, "Of course. This thing is useless in our sword sect. Moreover, you are his." Senior Sister Lu suddenly changed the topic. "Just a box?" The middle-aged man nodded, "Just a box." Senior Sister Lu looked at Yi Xian, "Then take it away." Yi Xian nodded slightly and then he looked at the middle-aged man, "You only have a strand of your soul left. Do you want to continue living in this world, or do you want me to send you into reincarnation?" The middle-aged man smiled bitterly, "Just let me perish in this world." Yi Xian shook his head, "Then allow me to send you into reincarnation." As soon as he finished speaking, he opened his palm, and the divine seal of samsara appeared. It didn't take long for a path of samsara to appear in front of him. The middle-aged man's eyes were filled with astonishment when he witnessed this scene. "You're actually a guardian of the Grand Tao." Yi Xian nodded, "I obtained this divine seal by chance. As for the guardian of the Grand Tao, I can barely be considered as one." The middle-aged man took a deep and long glance at Yi Xian, and then he said, "Take care of yourself." As soon as he finished speaking, he entered the path of samsara, and it didn't take long for it to close. Yi Xian walked over to the box, and then he sized it up and spoke softly, "It's that little fellow inside, right?" Senior Sister Lu shook her head, "I don't know." Meanwhile, Xiaoling took the box in her arms. Yi Xian smiled, "Xiaoling can you sense what's inside?" Xiaoling blinked and then she gazed at the box. A short moment later she grinned, "I'm not telling you." As soon as she finished speaking, she took the box into the pagoda. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. Senior Sister Lu spoke in a low voice, "How do you intend to use this box?" Yi Xian smiled, "It's an extraordinary gift I'm leaving for the doubting." As soon as he finished speaking, he glanced at the surroundings and spoke softly, "Fortunately, we didn't return empty-handed. Let's go." Senior Sister Lu nodded. The two of them left. However, they just left the hall when Yi Xian's expression suddenly changed drastically. He grabbed Senior Sister Lu's shoulder and sent her into the pagoda. Meanwhile, the sky suddenly split apart, and then a spear that carried a strand of blood-red flames stabbed down from the sky. Before this spear even landed, the entire sword sect was burned to ashes by a wave of flames. A cold smile curved the corners of Yi Xian's mouth. He opened his palm and a sword soared into the sky. Bang! The sky suddenly split apart and turned into a giant black hole. At the same time, a man appeared in the sky. The man was over 7 feet tall and had a burly physique. He wore a golden-purple beast robe, and his eyes were as sharp as swords. In his hand was a long halberd. The halberd was 12 feet long, and its shaft seemed to be forged from magma. The tip of the halberd seemed to contain the power of an Azura, and it exuded a terrifying malevolent and murderous aura that could confuse one's mind and cause one to feel a thirst for blood. He stood in the sky, and at this moment, the entire world seemed so tiny in front of him. Yi Xian looked at the man, doubting. In the sky, the man looked down at Yi Xian. "I am Xian Yong, one of the 4 divine generals of doubting. Today I have come to take your head." Yi Xian's eyes narrowed. "You've made a move on Sister Nian." He knew that if these people wanted to deal with him, they would definitely stall Mu Nian. In the 5th dimension. In the starry sky, an old man stood in front of Mu Nian. Was Bai Dizzy. Mu Nian looked at Bai Dizzy and smiled. "I thought you would have to wait until the 5th dimension tribulation." Bai Dizzy smiled. "Miss, how about this? We'll let young Master Yi and Xian Yong fight one-on-one. I doubting won't interfere and you won't interfere either. What do you think?" Mu Nian was silent. In the deepest part of the starry sky, a super array had enveloped the entire 5th dimension. If she went to save Yi Xian, this array and doubting expert would destroy the 5th dimension. Mu Nian turned her head to look at the 5th dimension and smiled, as expected of doubting, to be able to find my weakness so quickly. You all know that every time I make a move, the 5th dimension tribulation will arrive faster. And now, you all want to force me to make a move so that the 5th dimension tribulation will arrive earlier. Bai Dizzy looked at Mu Nian. "It's not easy for Miss to cultivate to this point. Do you really want to sacrifice yourself for a human?" Mu Nian smiled. "He called me sister. As an elder sister, isn't protecting her younger brother a matter of course?" Chapter 1333. Sister. As soon as Mu Nian said this, she shook her head and smiled. She suddenly realized that she had unknowingly acknowledged Yi Xian in her heart. It was not the same kind of acknowledgement as before. This kind of acknowledgement was as if she was treating him as family. But this feeling was not bad. At this moment, she suddenly understood the plain-dressed woman. In the past, she did not understand why the plain-dressed woman cared so much about Yi Xian. For an expert at her level, familial love and whatnot should be very, very indifferent. But at this moment, she realized that no matter how strong a person was, they were afraid of loneliness, afraid of not having someone they cared about. Loneliness was the greatest enemy of the strong. And the feeling of having someone they cared about was actually not bad. Familial love. For some people this was a very meaningless thing, but for others, it was more important than life. She, Mu Nianyan, had guarded this part of the universe for many years. All these years she was like an observer of the five-dimensional universe. She silently guarded and observed. But no one walked into her world. She did not hate people, but she did not like them either. Because people were really complicated and they could change themselves very willfully. Good today, bad tomorrow. However, she also felt that humans were very interesting, just like familial love, friendship, and love. She had to admit that being with Yi Xian made her a lot happier. In the Starry Sky by Dizzy looked at Mu Nianyan. It seems that Miss is determined to interfere in this matter. As he said this, he shook his head. Miss, you are injured, but you still want to meddle in other people's business. It is really not wise. Mu Nianyan collected her thoughts and said with a smile, let's wait and see. After saying this, she looked at the distant end of the starry sky. Bai Dizzy did not speak again, but looked in the direction of Yi Xian and Xian Yong. Below, Yi Xian's face was gloomy. He knew that Doubting dared to make a move because he must have stalled Sister Nian. At this moment he was a little worried. Even though Sister Nian was powerful, she was still injured. He had to rush back. Yi Xian looked up at Xian Yong in the sky. If he wanted to rush back, he had to first deal with this person. Divine General. One of the four great divine generals of Doubting. In the sky, Xian Yong quietly held the halberd in his hand. A powerful pressure swept down from the sky as if the sky was collapsing. Force. Oppressing others with force. This aura contained a domineering intent that looked down on the world, making it hard for one to breathe. Down below, Yi Xian revealed a savage smile. Bring it on. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned into a beam of sword light and soared into the sky. This sword directly broke through that powerful pressure. In the sky, Xian Yong's face was expressionless as he stabbed down with his halberd. The tip of the halberd was covered in flames that contained a monstrous spear aura. This halberd seemed like it was going to pierce through the heavens and earth. Yi Xian's sword arrived. A tit for tat. Boom. A wave of sword light suddenly shattered. This spear directly suppressed Yi Xian's sword force. However, Yi Xian did not retreat. Instead, he advanced. Holding the sword with both hands, the sword slid along the halberd and slashed towards Xian Yong's face. Xian Yong's reaction was extremely fast. The moment Yi Xian's sword changed direction, he swept the halberd in his hand. This sweep directly hit Yi Xian's sword. Boom. Yi Xian retreated several thousand feet in an instant. The moment he stopped, a cold gleam arrived. Before the halberd arrived, the cold gleam arrived first, followed by the force. Yi Xian's right foot slammed down. This chapter is not over. Please continue to the next page. He stomped on the starry sky, borrowing the power of the Tao of space to forcefully stop himself. At this moment, Xian Yong's halberd arrived. Yi Xian didn't choose to block it. If he did, he would lose momentum. The person in front of him was extremely good at gaining momentum. If he lost momentum, he would be at a complete disadvantage. Yi Xian didn't dodge or evade. He directly used his sword domain, which instantly weakened the sword aura. At this moment, Yi Xian's sword slashed down. Boom. The halberd was forced to a stop. And at this moment, Xian Yong suddenly vanished from where he was. In the distance, Yi Xian's pupils constricted. He suddenly slashed to his right, and this slash directly hit a cold gleam. Boom. The sky shook violently and then it exploded. And at this moment, afterimages suddenly appeared around Yi Xian. These afterimages seemed to be solid, and it was impossible to distinguish which was real and which was fake. At the same time, Yi Xian retreated explosively. Within the pitch-black spatial black hole, sword lights crisscrossed and ear-piercing explosions resounded incessantly. After retreating for about 15 minutes, those afterimages suddenly converged, and the next moment, a halberd stabbed straight at the center of Yi Xian's brows. This strike caused the heavens and the earth to tremble. Yi Xian still didn't retreat. He held his sword with both hands and slashed forward. At the same time, his sword domain suppressed Xian Yong's halberd once more. Bang! Within the sword domain, an enormous bang that shook the heavens resounded abruptly, and then Yi Xian's face instantly turned ghastly pale. However, he'd forcefully blocked this halberd strike. After that, he suddenly grabbed the halberd with his left hand, and then he swiftly stabbed forward with the sword in his right hand. However, Xian Yong's reaction was extremely swift. At the instant Yi Xian's sword stabbed forward, Xian Yong suddenly let go of the halberd, clenched his right hand into a fist, and then smashed his fist towards Yi Xian's sword. Rumble. Both of them retreated explosively at the same time. This caused Yi Xian to retreat by over 300 m, and the space he retreated to had collapsed and been obliterated. In the distance, Xian Yong had stopped as well, and then he suddenly tossed the halberd in his right hand towards Yi Xian. At the same time, he suddenly stomped his right foot backwards, and his entire body shot out explosively like a cannonball. Yi Xian had just stopped when a halberd tore through the sky towards him, and it was Xian Yong who was following behind it. A wisp of ferocity flashed through Yi Xian's eyes as he stabbed with his sword. This time, it was a strike to decide life and death with a single strike. It was a sword technique that the woman in a simple dress had taught him. A single strike of the sword to decide life and death. Actually, it was more appropriate to say that he could decide life and death with a single strike of the sword. Because he didn't possess the invincible strength that the woman in a simple dress possessed, so it was impossible for him to decide the life and death of anyone with a single strike of the sword. Once this strike of the sword was executed, only one of them would die. This was his current state of mind. A single strike. A sword howl resounded through the starry sky like a thunderclap. Bang. As soon as the halberd came into contact with Yi Xian's sword, both sword and halberd trembled violently, and then the halberd was blasted flying. This strike of the sword had destroyed the halberd. However, Xian Yong had already appeared in front of Yi Xian, and he smashed his fist towards Yi Xian's chest. His fist was extremely overbearing, and it wasn't the slightest bit weaker than the halberd. Dual cultivation of the fist and halberd. Yi Xian didn't dodge when facing Xian Yong's fist, and he allowed Xian Yong's fist to smash against his chest. However, he'd smashed his fist against Xian Yong's chest as well. Of course, this wasn't an ordinary punch, but a Taoist scripture martial technique, courting death. Their fists had just arrived before each other. Rumble. The mountains for tens of thousands of miles around them were suddenly razed to the ground, and the two of them were blasted back. They flew for tens of thousands of feet, and the entire sky and earth was a mess. After Yi Xian stopped, he spat out a mouthful of blood, and his body cracked inch by inch. Fortunately, he had the indestructible body of 10,000 Buddhas, so his body wasn't completely destroyed. However, it was still miserable, and his body was covered in cracks, revealing his white bones. In the distance, Xian Yong wasn't having a good time either. He'd taken the brunt of Yi Xian's attack. This chapter is not over, please turn the page. After using the Taoist scripture martial technique, he'd instantly retreated thousands of feet away. His battle robe had also turned to ash, and his body was covered in several cracks. His body was dyed red with blood, and he looked like a man made of blood. Both of them were in a miserable state. Xian Yong looked at the distant Yi Xian, and his expression was incomparably solemn. He hadn't expected that the human in front of him would fight him to this extent. It had to be known that Yi Xian was only at the self-release realm, and hadn't reached the Tao corroboration realm. In next to no time he suddenly noticed a problem. It was that he'd suffered a great loss by trading injury for injury just now. Because he'd been suppressing Yi Xian earlier, and it was only just now that he'd chosen to trade injury for injury that caused both sides to be injured. The reason he'd chosen to trade injury for injury was because he didn't think that Yi Xian would be able to take a punch from him head-on. Of course, he hadn't expected that Yi Xian would possess such a formidable martial technique. Even though he'd resisted that martial technique just now, he'd been heavily injured. Xian Yong took a deep breath. Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, "I've more or less recovered." Xian Yong looked at Yi Xian, and he was stunned when he saw Yi Xian. Because at this moment Yi Xian's injuries had mostly recovered. Xian Yong stared fixedly at Yi Xian. How could this be possible? Yi Xian naturally hadn't told Xian Yong that his body possessed the ability to heal. A god seal suddenly appeared between his brows, and then he vanished on the spot in the next moment. A single strike to decide life and death. After he attained the Tao corroboration realm, the might of Yi Xian's attack had instantly risen explosively, and it was at least a few times stronger than before. A ferocious expression flashed through Xian Yong's eyes. He gestured with his right hand, and the halberd appeared in his grasp. In the next moment he leaped up and stabbed with the halberd. Flames incinerated the sky on the halberd. A sharp and ear-piercing sound of something being torn apart resounded abruptly. Bang! Suddenly, an expanse of flames and the glow of a sword erupted. In an instant, both of them retreated explosively. During this process, Yi Xian suddenly opened his palm, and then his sword flew forward and slashed through the surroundings. Xian Yong's reaction was extremely swift. At the instant that Yi Xian attacked, the halberd in his hand had suddenly flown forward, and it tore through the air and tore through everything. The halberd and sword collided once more. Bang! The glow of the sword and flames suddenly erupted. The entire heavens and the earth trembled. As soon as Yi Xian stopped moving, he opened his palm, and the soul-suppressing sword appeared in his grasp. He pointed it at Xian Yong from afar, soul suppression with a single strike. Om. A sword howl suddenly shook the heavens and the earth, and then an extremely powerful strand of the soul suddenly locked onto Xian Yong. Meanwhile, Xian Yong suddenly roared furiously, "Disperse!" As soon as he finished speaking, a powerful sound wave swept out from within him, and it was accompanied by a powerful aura of evil and slaughter. Rumble. This energy had actually forcefully obstructed the energy of the soul-suppressing sword. Yi Xian's attack hadn't been able to successfully suppress Xian Yong's soul. Xian Yong had experienced countless battles, and his soul was extraordinarily strong. So, unless the soul-suppressing sword was stabbed into his body, otherwise, it was practically impossible to suppress his soul from afar. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly vanished on the spot. A strand of sword light tore through the battlefield. The 3 sword lights contained 3 powerful domains. A single strike to decide life and death plus 3 domains. Yi Xian's strongest attack. A wisp of a ferocious smile arose on the corners of Xian Yong's mouth. He suddenly stomped his right foot on the ground, and space collapsed while his figure shot forward explosively. A strand of flames instantly swept through the sky from the halberd in his hand, and it was like heavenly flames could destroy the world. A halberd of life and death. Only one of them would die beneath this halberd strike. Doubting divine generals had never been afraid of death. P.S. It's a new month. Vote if you have a ticket. End of this chapter. Chapter 1334. In the sky, both Yi Xian and Divine General Xian Yong executed their strongest attacks. It didn't take long for Yi Xian's sword to collide with Divine General Xian Yong's halberd. In an instant, bang! In an instant, the space in a radius of hundreds of thousands of kilometers was reduced to ashes. Countless rays of sword light and flaming halberd energy shot out from the pitch-black space, and it was a complete mess. As for Yi Xian and Xian Yong, they both retreated explosively for tens of thousands of meters. After Yi Xian stopped, his body slowly fell from the sky while blood gushed out incessantly from his mouth. His injuries were extremely severe, and his entire body was covered in cracks. He was like porcelain that had suffered a heavy blow and would shatter at any moment. At this moment he couldn't feel his own body anymore. In the distance, Xian Yong was also slowly falling from the sky. His injuries were extremely severe as well, and his body was covered in dense sword energy. Especially his right hand, it had almost been chopped off by Yi Xian's sword. However, the halberd by his side still emitted a powerful halberd intent. The halberd's soul was inextinguishable, and its battle intent surged. Suddenly, the halberd transformed into a black ray of light that shot out and slashed towards Yi Xian in the distance. An autonomous attack. Meanwhile, a sword suddenly flew out from within Yi Xian's body. It was the soul-suppressing sword. The soul-suppressing sword transformed into a black ray of sword light that slashed towards the halberd. It didn't take long for the sword and halberd to fight in midair. Meanwhile, Yi Xian and Xian Yong had already landed on the ground. Bang! Yi Xian's body trembled slightly, and he spat out another mouthful of blood. He took a deep breath, placed his hands on the ground, and slowly exerted force in an attempt to stand up. However, he realized that it was extremely difficult, because he could barely feel his own body anymore. But he knew that he had to stand up. Yi Xian took another deep breath, roared furiously, and suddenly exerted force with his right hand. Crack! The sound of bones breaking suddenly resounded from this exertion. His right hand was directly fractured. Because his entire body had been smashed into pieces just now, that was why a light exertion of force was able to fracture his arm. Although his arm was fractured, he still stood up. In the distance, Xian Yong had also stood up and was slowly walking towards him. Yi Xian grinned and then slowly walked towards Xian Yong. Both of them walked very slowly, but the desire to fight in their eyes was unprecedentedly strong. Meanwhile, Yi Xian's sword and Xian Yong's halberd were still locked in a fierce battle in the sky. The battle between the halberd and sword was like a raging fire, incomparably intense. In the five-dimensional universe. In the starry sky, Mu Niannian suddenly laughed and said, as expected of the doubting immortal general. You have been through hundreds of battles. Even though your body is broken, your will is still strong. In your eyes there is only battle and death. Bai Dizzy smiled faintly. I have to say, this young Master Yi has shocked this old one. At such a young age you're not only powerful, but you're also as ferocious as a doubting divine general. If he joins my doubting, I'm afraid he'll be able to threaten the white-robed divine general's position in the future. Mu Niannian looked at Bai Dizzy and said with a smile, White-robed divine general? Bai Dizzy said with a smile, I am the strongest divine general of doubting. I have fought in the Dao Tomb all my life and have only lost once. At this point he looked at Mu Niannian. After learning that you killed Heng Tianwu in the underworld, he wanted to meet you. Unfortunately, he has a mission to guard the heaven abyss. What a pity. Mu Niannian laughed. Bai Dizzy was a little curious. What are you laughing at, miss? Mu Niannian said with a smile. My little brother has a sister called Qing'er. At this point she suddenly became excited. In that case it seems like she's going to call me sister. At this point she seemed to have thought of something and quickly shook her head. No, this woman is unreasonable. I can't take advantage of her or I'll be beaten. At this time Bai Dizzy suddenly said, Qing'er? Is she the woman in a plain dress behind Yi Xian? Mu Niannian looked at Bai Dizzy and said with a smile, It seems like you've investigated very clearly. You even investigated her. Bai Dizzy shook his head and smiled. We've always been very serious when facing our enemies. Mu Niannian said with a smile, as expected of a force that could exist for so long. By the way, how much do you know about this Qing'er? Bai Dizzy shook his head. I only know that she only uses one sword to kill. Mu Niannian blinked. What else? Bai Dizzy looked at Mu Niannian and said with a smile, What do you want to say, miss? Mu Niannian said with a straight face, She's very powerful really. Most importantly, this woman's way of thinking is very dangerous, as if she wants to destroy the universe at the slightest provocation. It's really a little scary. Bai Dizzy said with a smile, Miss, she only needs one sword to kill in this lower realm. It's not difficult to say anything. Mu Niannian was a little curious. Why do you say that? Bai Dizzy said with a smile, Maybe it's not that she's too strong but that the people of this world are too weak? Mu Niannian blinked then laughed. Actually, what you said makes a lot of sense. Bai Dizzy looked at Mu Niannian and didn't say anything. Mu Niannian also didn't say anything. She turned her head and looked in the distance. Yi Xian and Divine General Shen Yong were only about 10 zhang apart. Yi Xian didn't say anything, his left hand slowly clenched, but at this time he couldn't mobilize any strength and opposite him, Shen Yong was the same. At this time Yi Xian and Shen Yong suddenly charged at each other. Both of them seemed like they were fighting one last attack before death. Shen Yong's fist smashed against Yi Xian's chest, and Yi Xian's fist smashed against Shen Yong's chest as well. Bang, bang. Both of them were instantly blasted flying, and then they smashed heavily against the ground. This time their bodies twitched while blood sprayed. Their injuries were very, very serious. Meanwhile Yi Xian suddenly roared furiously, and then he forced himself to stand up. He opened his palm and a sword appeared in it. Executing Heaven Sword. Yi Xian looked at Shen Yong and grinned, I have two swords. As soon as he finished speaking, the Executing Heaven Sword in his hand suddenly flew out. However, it wasn't able to kill Shen Yong because a beast soul had suddenly appeared in front of Shen Yong, and the beast soul suddenly roared furiously and forcefully blocked the Executing Heaven Sword. Meanwhile, another sword appeared in Yi Xian's hand. The Sword Spirit. Shen Yong's expression instantly changed when he saw the Sword Spirit. But right at this moment, a middle-aged man suddenly appeared on the scene. The middle-aged man wore black armor and held a long saber in his hand. His gaze descended onto Yi Xian, and in the next moment he raised his saber and charged towards Yi Xian. In the fifth dimension. Mu Niannian smiled silently and didn't say anything. Bai Dizzy wasn't too far away from her as he gazed into the distance, and no one knew what he was thinking. Right when the middle-aged man arrived in front of Yi Xian, Shen Yong suddenly said, Stop. The middle-aged man stopped and gazed at Shen Yong. Shen Yong slowly closed his eyes. I'm fighting him fairly. Why are you interfering? The middle-aged man hesitated for a moment before he said, Divine General, the objective of our trip is... Shut up. Shen Yong suddenly gazed at the middle-aged man. Stand down. The middle-aged man didn't dare refute him and immediately retreated to the side. Shen Yong looked at Yi Xian. You have a swordsman woman in your body. Why didn't you let her out just now? Yi Xian smiled and said, You and I are having a fair battle. Why would you want an outsider to interfere? Shen Yong looked deeply at Yi Xian. What a fair fight. Although you are my opponent, you are still an upright person. Next time we will fight to the death. Finished then he turned around and left. The middle-aged man hesitated for a moment, wanting to say something but hesitating. In the distance, Shen Yong suddenly said, I'll take full responsibility. The middle-aged man sighed softly, then turned around and left. He could actually sense Yi Xian's weakness. Could be said that he could kill Yi Xian effortlessly now. However, he did not dare to reject Shen Yong's order. After Shen Yong left, Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. It had to be said that Divine General Shen Yong was indeed very strong, be it in terms of battle awareness or ruthlessness. This time, if his physical body was not strong enough, he would definitely not be able to defeat the other party. This was because the other party was a fist and halberd cultivator. Moreover, if the soul-suppressing sword was not strong enough, it would not work because the halberd in Shen Yong's hand was at least at the Tao-confirming realm. The battle just now was not only a battle between him and Shen Yong, but also the soul-suppressing sword and that long sword. Of course, he still had a trump card that he had not taken out, and that was the Chengquan gourd and the power of his bloodline. However, he was also very clear that if he had a trump card, others would definitely have a trump card too. The other party was experienced in hundreds of battles, so it was impossible that he did not have a trump card. Yi Xian withdrew his thoughts and looked at senior sister Lu. Let's go back. With that, he turned around and was about to leave, but he suddenly realized that his injuries were very serious. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled bitterly. Then he sat down cross-legged and began to heal. In the five-dimensional universe. Bai Dizzy looked at Moon Yanyan. This lady is very confident in young Master Yi. From the beginning until now, he realized that the woman in front of him had not shown any signs of making a move. There was only one explanation, and that was that she had confidence in Yi Xian. Moon Yanyan smiled. Your divine general has the demeanor of an expert. If he meets me next time, I promise to leave his corpse intact, haha. With that, she turned around and left. In the field, Bai Dizzy was silent. This time he had originally wanted to force Moon Yanyan to make a move, but he had not expected that Yi Xian would be evenly matched with Divine General Shen Yong, and that Yi Xian was only in his early 20s. Not only was he young, but his strength was also so heaven-defying. Most importantly, he had a ruthless spirit in his bones. Bai Dizzy was silent for a long time before he turned around and left. At this moment he had already made up his mind. This Yi Xian could not be allowed to live, especially not to allow Yi Xian to rely on the Tao tomb. Yi Xian must die. Could be said that this was a doubting attitude. Yi Xian, who was recuperating, suddenly raised his head. He did not know when Moon Yanyan had appeared in front of him. Seeing Moon Yanyan, Yi Xian immediately breathed a sigh of relief. Sister Nyan, has doubting already made a move? Moon Yanyan smiled. Yes. Yi Xian was about to speak when Moon Yanyan said, Focus on recuperating. Yi Xian nodded. 4 hours later, Yi Xian's injuries were 80 to 90% healed. Beside him, Moon Yanyan smiled. How did that battle feel? Yi Xian said with a smile, That felt great. Moon Yanyan looked at Yi Xian. Doubting has someone dozens of times stronger than the one just now. Yi Xian was speechless. Moon Yanyan smiled. Scared? Yi Xian nodded. A little. Moon Yanyan laughed. She lightly patted Yi Xian's shoulder. Useless. A real man lives in this world with his head holding up the sky and his feet stepping on the ground fearlessly. You're actually afraid. Useless. Yi Xian suddenly asked, Sister Nyan, are you afraid of Qing'er? Moon Yanyan's expression froze. After a moment she looked up at the sky. Tonight's moon is not bad. The wind is gentle. My hands are a little itchy. Yi Xian was speechless. Chapter 1335. Looking at the wounded Yi Xian, Moon Yanyan didn't do it. She just rolled her eyes at Yi Xian. Yi Xian chuckled. Sister Nyan, actually Qing'er is a good person. Moon Yanyan shook her head. Idiot, that's for you. Then she smiled. The scariest thing about her is her indifference to life. In her eyes, there's only the difference between the living and the dead. Yi Xian was silent. Indeed, Qing'er was sometimes too cold. As if thinking of something, Yi Xian asked, Sister Nyan, how bad is Qing'er? Moon Yanyan was silent. Yi Xian asked, Even you don't know? Mu Niannian chuckled and said, I can roughly guess but I can't tell you. Yixin was puzzled. Why? Mu Niannian blinked. Because I don't want to hurt you. Yixin was speechless. Mu Niannian smiled. Come follow me. It's time for you to understand something. Then she turned and left. Yixin hurried to follow her. In the underworld, Bai Dizzy appeared at the intersection of the underworld and the living world. As soon as he appeared, Mu Sheng appeared in front of him. Bai Dizzy smiled. Miss Mu Sheng, are you willing to go doubting with us? Mu Sheng narrowed her eyes. Bai Di Sheng, do you know my duty? Bai Dizzy nodded. I do. Miss Mu Sheng has guarded this world for so many years. You've done a great service. Mu Sheng said in a low voice. You don't want the boundary between the underworld and the living world. Bai Dizzy nodded. Mu Sheng was silent for a moment. Bai Di Sheng, I can leave this place. But I don't want to go doubting for now. I want to look around. White Emperor Star Lord fell silent. Mu Sheng continued, White Emperor Star Sovereign, I don't have any other intentions. I just want to look around, that's all. Bai Dizzy glanced at Mu Sheng and said softly, the door of doubting will always be open for you. As soon as he finished speaking, he opened his palm, and there was a thick ancient book in his hand. He flipped it open and found Mu Sheng's name. After that, he swiped it lightly, and Mu Sheng's name vanished from the book. In an instant, something seemed to disappear from Mu Sheng's body. Bai Dizzy looked at Mu Sheng and said, I have now removed Miss from the priesthood. Miss is now free. Miss can go anywhere in this vast world. However, the doubting does not want Miss to become the doubting's enemy in the future. Mu Sheng took a deep breath and said, Don't worry, White Emperor Star Lord. Even if I don't return to the doubting, I won't become an enemy of the doubting. I'm the protector of the Grand Tao, and that will never change. Bai Dizzy nodded, Miss, take care. With that he turned around and left. In the same place, Mu Sheng looked around with a complicated expression. At this time Manju and Xiahua appeared beside her. Manju said softly, You can go to the doubting. Mu Sheng was expressionless. The doubting is no longer the doubting of the past. The 3,000 Grand Taos have become the tools of some people. Manju was silent. Mu Sheng looked at Manju and Xiahua and said, Let's go. Manju and Xiahua nodded and soon the three women disappeared. With Mu Sheng's departure, there were no longer any obstacles between the Yin realm and the Yang realm. They could go from the Yin realm to the Yang realm at any time. Bai Dizzy arrived at the Yin realm's lotus platform. On the lotus platform was Nanzang Bodhisattva. Bai Dizzy smiled, Nanzang Bodhisattva, how have you been? Nanzang put his palms together. White Emperor Starlord, did you come for the fifth dimension? Bai the Emperor nodded. Nanzang, the doubting needs your help. Nanzang shook his head and smiled. White Emperor Starlord must be joking. Bai Dizzy said softly, the majority of my doubting experts are guarding the celestial abyss. Nanzang was silent. Bai Dizzy smiled, I won't help for nothing. Nanzang looked at Bai Dizzy, does Starlord know the strength of that girl? Bai Dizzy said softly, this is no longer important. Nanzang frowned, what does this flower mean? Bai Dizzy looked at Nanzang, she is provoking the might of the doubting. Provoking. Nanzang was silent. At this moment he understood. The relationship between the doubting and Yixin could not be resolved peacefully. Yixin had the Tao scripture that the doubting wanted. Moreover, Yixin had killed the sixth princess of the doubting. With this, the doubting would not be able to resolve peacefully with Yixin. As for Mu Niannian, this woman was already provoking the doubting. The doubting would not allow anyone to provoke their might. Nanzang was still silent. He had seen Mu Niannian and knew how powerful that woman was. He did not want to face that woman. As if knowing what Nanzang was thinking, Bai Dizzy suddenly said, don't worry, someone will fight her. We need Nanzang Bodhisattva to help us with something else. Nanzang suddenly shook his head, White Emperor Starlord, go find someone else. I am already an outsider and do not want to interfere in worldly matters. White Emperor Starlord smiled, Bright Mirror. Hearing this, Nanzang's expression changed, Bright Mirror? Bright Mirror was a Buddhist treasure. White Emperor Starlord nodded. Nanzang was silent. A moment later, White Emperor Starlord left the lotus platform and arrived at an entrance to an underground place. Entrance to Hell. There were a total of 18 levels under this entrance. White Emperor Starlord arrived at the entrance to the 18th level, but he did not enter. Looking in front of him, he softly said, Your Excellency, scram. All of a sudden, an angry roar came from inside. For a moment, the entire underworld was shaken, and the 18 levels of hell were wailing like ghosts and howling like wolves. After a moment of silence, White Emperor Star-Lord shook his head. What a pitiful person. After saying this, he turned around and left. After coming out, White Emperor Star-Lord saw the Lord of Underworld. The Lord of Underworld said calmly, "As I said, it is useless." White Emperor Star-Lord nodded. "Fine, if he likes to imprison himself, let him imprison himself." The Lord of Underworld asked, "What do you plan to do next?" White Emperor Star-Lord said softly, "To deal with that woman, we must deal with the fifth dimension. Now that the underworld and the yang world are connected, we can make the fifth dimension tribulation of the fifth dimension arrive in advance. If that woman wants to protect the fifth dimension, she must fight against the fifth dimension tribulation. At that time she will be at her weakest." After a moment of silence, the Lord of Underworld asked, "How do we make the fifth dimension tribulation of the fifth dimension arrive in advance?" White Emperor Star-Lord said softly, "Destroy the origin of the fifth dimension." The Lord of Underworld said in a deep voice, "Who will deal with that woman?" In fact, the fifth dimension was not scary and neither was Yi Xian. Yi Xian's threat was in the future, while that woman's threat was in the present. As long as they could deal with Mu Nian, the fifth dimension could be destroyed with a flick of their fingers. White Emperor Star-Lord said with a smile, "Lord of Underworld, rest assured. That woman will naturally be dealt with by me doubting." The Lord of Underworld nodded. "Good." White Emperor Star-Lord turned to look at the depths of the starry sky and said softly, "They should be here soon." Mu Nian brought Yi Xian to a lake. The lake was in the shape of a heart and the water was clear. At a glance, one could see the blue sky and white clouds. Yi Xian looked at Mu Nian and Mu Nian said with a smile, "Heavenly Heart Lake. I gave it that name." Yi Xian hurriedly said, "It's a good name. Sounds good." Mu Nian glanced at Yi Xian and said, "Slippery fellow." She pulled Yi Xian's hand and walked towards the lake. Soon the two of them reached the bottom of the lake. There were no living creatures at the bottom of the lake, but when they reached the deepest part of the lake, a wave of hot air surged over. This wave of hot air caused Yi Xian's expression to change. This was because he was not used to the temperature. One had to know that his current physical body was extremely powerful. Mu Nian continued to pull Yi Xian down. Soon the two of them arrived in front of a barrier. The barrier was 100 zhang wide and behind it was surging magma. Yi Xian looked at Mu Nian and said, "Sister Nian, this is?" Mu Nian smiled and said, "This is the fifth dimension tribulation." Fifth dimension tribulation. Yi Xian was stunned. Mu Nian chuckled and said, "Actually there are many hidden dangers in this universe, but I've suppressed them. Just like the scene in front of you, I've used my power to suppress the magma. It's not just a little bit of magma, it's the entire underground magma. Once the magma comes out, the power of the magma that has accumulated for tens of thousands of years will destroy everything. Not only that, there are many hidden dangers in this universe. Simply put, it's very dangerous." Yi Xian was silent. Mu Nian smiled and said, "The reason I brought you here is to tell you that the danger of the fifth dimension is not limited to the outside world. The fifth dimension itself is very dangerous. The entire fifth dimension is full of dangers, and these dangers are not something you can solve with strength alone. Take me for example. Although I can suppress them for a while, the more I suppress them, the more terrifying they will become in the future. Suppressing them is not a long-term solution. Do you understand what I mean?" Yi Xian nodded. "I understand. We must change the fifth dimension." Mu Nian nodded. "We must change it. Originally, I thought we would have time to slowly change everything, but now it seems we don't have that much time." Saying this, she raised her head and looked at the horizon. She smiled and said, "Really, not even a bit of time is given." After saying this, she brought Yi Xian away from the depths of the underground and arrived at the lakeside. Yi Xian raised his head and looked at the horizon. He saw an old man. Was Bai Dizzy. Bai Dizzy looked at Mu Nian and faintly smiled. "We meet again." Mu Nian smiled. "You really don't give people a chance to breathe." Bai Dizzy shook his head. "Miss, if you are willing to pledge allegiance to the doubting, we can immediately retreat and never harm the fifth dimension. Not only that, the doubting can take any position other than the doubting ancestor." It had to be said that this condition was very tempting. Mu Nian smiled. "First make me surrender, then control the fifth dimension and finally control me. This is your real plan, isn't it?" Bai Dizzy looked at Mu Nian and didn't say anything. Mu Nian faintly smiled. "I think you must have prepared a big gift for me. Come." Bai Dizzy softly said, "Then I will have to offend you." After saying this, he turned around and waved his right hand. Battle path appear. As the sound of his voice faded, a golden light suddenly appeared in the entire sky. Within the golden light was a golden path that was hundreds of feet wide. Within the golden path, a 9-headed roc suddenly flew out. On the head of the 9-headed roc stood a man holding a halberd. At this time, Dizzy spread out his right hand and lightly waved it in all directions. In an instant, a golden light covered a radius of tens of thousands of miles. Dizzy faintly smiled. Battle path, I will not rest until I die. Miss, are you ready? P.S. Give me a ticket. Chapter 1336. Battle Tao. The so-called Battle Tao referred to the Tao of war. This was a kind of attitude towards doubting. Doubting had only been used on the Tao tomb. Because Battle Tao was connected to doubting experts could come over at any time. But now doubting was being used on Mu Niannian. Clearly they wanted to kill Mu Niannian this time. Below, Mu Niannian smiled. Her smile was very calm. Won't stop until one of us dies? Dizzy looked at Mu Niannian. Yes. Mu Niannian laughed heartily. Then come. Dizzy quietly retreated. In the sky, on the Battle Tao, the man riding the 9-headed roc suddenly swooped down from the sky. Boom. This dive was like several towering mountains crashing down, and a pressure that could destroy the heavens and annihilate the earth swept through the entire land. At this moment, the entire world trembled. It was as if doomsday had arrived. Mu Niannian's eyes gradually turned cold. This man's target was not only her, but also the origin of the 5-dimensional universe. If this man landed, the origin of this universe would definitely be heavily damaged. Yi Xian looked at the man swooping down from the sky with a trace of worry in his eyes. This man was much stronger than Divine General Shen Yong. Most importantly, the 9-headed rocs were not any weaker than this man. The power of the 9-headed rocs combined with the man's strength could truly be described as world-destroying. At this moment, Mu Niannian suddenly looked at Yi Xian and smiled. Do you still remember something I said to you before? Yi Xian asked. What? Mu Niannian rolled her eyes at Yi Xian. If you don't remember, then forget it. With that, she lightly stamped her right foot and soared into the sky. In the same place, Yi Xian was dumbfounded. In the sky, Mu Niannian's petite figure seemed exceptionally tiny compared to the 9-headed rocs and the man. However, the 9-headed rocs and the man had extremely serious expressions on their faces. How could they dare to underestimate the woman in front of them? This was an existence that had insta-killed a divine general. The man gripped the heavenly halberd tightly in his right hand. He stared at the calm Mu Niannian below. Doubting Vanguard General Ren Tianqing. Please advise me, miss. As soon as he finished speaking, the 9 roc beneath him suddenly raised its head and let out a furious howl, and then its speed increased explosively by a few times. At this moment, it was as if the world was about to collapse. At the same time, an extremely terrifying pressure directly enveloped Mu Niannian below. Under this pressure, Mu Niannian was like a small boat in a raging storm, appearing extremely frail. Right at this moment, Mu Niannian suddenly vanished on the spot. In the next moment, the pressure in the sky vanished without a trace, and then Mu Niannian had suddenly appeared in front of Ren Tianqing. Ren Tianqing's pupils constricted, and he instinctively swung his halberd. However, Mu Niannian's fist suddenly smashed against his throat. Crack! The sound of bones breaking resounded, and then Ren Tianqing's head instantly flew into the air. Meanwhile, Mu Niannian suddenly descended onto the back of the 9-headed rocs, and then she lightly stomped her right foot on the ground. Bang! The 9-headed rocs suddenly exploded apart, and blood instantly dyed the entire sky red. At this moment everyone was stunned, including Yi Xian. Another instant kill. Yi Xian stared fixedly at Mu Niannian. Exactly how strong is Big Sister Nian? Dizzy was gazing at Mu Niannian as well, and there was a trace of seriousness in his eyes. Another instant kill. Actually, he knew that Ren Tianqing couldn't defeat Mu Niannian, and the reason he'd asked Ren Tianqing to fight was because he wanted to see exactly how strong Mu Niannian was. Unfortunately, he'd still been disappointed. Mu Niannian had instantly killed Ren Tianqing. Since it was an instant kill, then he naturally didn't know Mu Niannian's approximate strength. Dizzy remained silent, and no one knew what he was thinking. In the sky, Mu Niannian waved her hand lightly, and then the blood in the sky instantly vanished without a trace. After that, she gazed at Dizzy and smiled. Next. Her voice was calm, but it carried a strand of domineering aura. Dizzy gazed at Mu Niannian and spoke softly. I underestimated you, young miss. Mu Nianyan shook her head and smiled. All of you've never taken me seriously. As she spoke, she looked at Yi Xian below. Sister Nian has lived for so many years and she understands one principle. You must always maintain a low-key and humble heart. As a person you can't be complacent and you can't think that you're above everyone else. You must know that there's always someone better out there. Yi Xian was silent. Low-key and humble. Sister Nian had said this principle more than once. In fact, it might be related to Qing Er. In the fifth dimension before she'd met Qing Er, Sister Nian should be invincible. And when she'd met Qing Er, it was probably her low-key and humble attitude that saved her. After all, Qing Er wasn't a kind person. Being arrogant in front of Qing Er? That would mean that she was really tired of living. Of course, Yi Xian knew that Sister Nian had said this not only for him to hear, but also for the doubting to hear. The doubting had been arrogant from the start, and he'd even tried to recruit Sister Nian. From the doubting's point of view, they'd recruited Sister Nian because they valued her. But from Sister Nian's point of view, the doubting's recruitment was looking down on her. Yi Xian glanced at Sister Nian. At this moment he was suddenly in a daze. Just how strong was Sister Nian? He really didn't have any confidence. In the sky, Bai Dizzy looked at Mu Nianyan and spoke softly, "Young miss, what you said just now is very reasonable. But do you really understand this principle?" Mu Nianyan smiled. "You want to say that I've underestimated the doubting, right?" Bai Dizzy smiled. "You think that we've underestimated you, but we also think that you've underestimated us." Mu Nianyan laughed heartily. "What you said actually makes sense. Since that's the case, let's continue fighting. As for who underestimated who, we'll only know after we fight." As she spoke, she glanced at the doubting and smiled. "Why don't I go to the doubting and fight?" "Go to the doubting." Bai Dizzy narrowed her eyes and slowly clenched her right hand. Below, Yi Xian's eyelids twitched. Was Sister Nian playing with her life? At this moment, Bai Dizzy suddenly smiled. "Young miss, you don't want the battle to take place in the fifth dimension." Mu Nianyan blinked. "You can say that." Bai Dizzy shook her head. "I'm sorry, I'm afraid it won't go as you wish." Mu Nianyan looked at Bai Dizzy and did not speak. At this moment, Guanyin suddenly appeared beside Yi Xian and said in a deep voice, "I've just received news that countless Yin Qi has suddenly appeared in the fifth dimension. This Yin Qi is corroding the ecological environment of the entire fifth dimension. In addition, the spiritual Qi of our fifth dimension is flowing away at an alarming speed for some unknown reason." Hearing this, Yi Xian raised his head and looked at Bai Dizzy. "You're targeting the fifth dimension." Bai Dizzy smiled, then looked at Mu Nianyan. "Young miss, at this speed, the fifth dimension tribulation of the fifth dimension will arrive in advance." Mu Nianyan smiled. "I've really underestimated you. How dare you let the Dao realm guarding the Yin world and the Yang world leave? How are your actions any different from those of the Dao breakers?" Bai Dizzy looked at Mu Nianyan. "Anything can be changed." Mu Nianyan laughed. "No wonder the 3,000 great Daos collapsed. The real reason is not the Dao breakers but you, the Dao guardians. The 3,000 great Daos guarding the world is an excellent thing in itself, but you Dao guardians abuse it. If the spirit of the great Dao is still here, I'm afraid you'll be angered to death, ha." Bai Dizzy stared at Mu Nianyan. "You actually know about the spirit of the great Dao." Mu Nianyan suddenly turned to look at Yi Xian. "Remember, the spirit of the great Dao is the boss of the 3,000 great Daos. If you gather all 9 Dao scriptures, you can summon the spirit of the great Dao. At that time, these Dao guardians will be your little brothers, understand?" Yi Xian nodded. "I'll try my best." In the distance, Bai Dizzy smiled. "He won't have this chance. Because today you siblings in this universe will disappear from this world." As his voice faded, he turned to look at the depths of the starry sky. "Activate." As soon as Bai Dizzy's voice faded, in the depths of the distant starry sky, a white light suddenly appeared. The next moment, the white light covered the entire starry sky, and then countless strange runes suddenly appeared in the white light. With the appearance of this huge formation, the temperature of the entire fifth dimension suddenly soared. Not only that, but the spiritual energy of the entire fifth dimension was also disappearing at a speed visible to the naked eye. This kind of disappearing could be felt personally. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian's expression suddenly changed. In the sky, as Mu Nianyan looked at the formation, she slowly clenched her right hand. At this moment, on the battle path, a burly man suddenly appeared. The man was tens of feet tall and he held a giant axe in his hand. When he appeared on the battle path, the entire world suddenly trembled as if it could not bear his power. The man looked down at Mu Nianyan below and smiled coldly. "I am the doubting giant Ling Tian God. Mortal, the doubting ancestor has the virtue of cherishing life, and I advise you to surrender. You should immediately kneel down and kowtow to thank the heavens. However, you ate a bear's heart and a leopard's heart and actually dared to resist my doubting. You. At this moment, Mu Nianyan suddenly disappeared, and the next moment the giant Ling Tian god's expression became ferocious. How dare you attack in front of this god? After saying that, he chopped down with his axe. This chop directly split the heavens and the earth. The power of this axe could really destroy this world. And the opponent's goal was also very obvious, to severely damage this world. Right at this moment, Mu Nianyan's fist suddenly landed on the gigantic axe. Boom. Under everyone's gaze, the giant axe suddenly exploded, and Mu Nianyan arrived in front of the giant Ling Tian god. She punched the giant Ling Tian god's head. Bang. The giant Ling Tian god's head directly exploded. His soul was completely destroyed. Mu Nianyan clapped her hands. What kind of rubbish is this? Kowtow to thank the heavens? It's fine if you're used to kneeling, but you want me to kneel like you? As she said that, she looked at the formation in the depths of the starry sky, and in front of that formation 28 super experts had appeared out of nowhere. Mu Nianyan squinted her eyes. The 28 lunar mansions of the legends. In the distance, Bai Dizzy looked at Mu Nianyan. Your Excellency, even if you have the power to kill the 28 lunar mansions, you still can't prevent the fifth dimension calamity from coming today because every time you attack, it consumes a lot of energy in this universe. Am I right? Mu Nianyan was silent. Bai Dizzy faintly smiled. Look around. Yixin looked around. With this glance he could see very far away. At this moment, the fifth dimension calamity actually caused mountains to collapse, spiritual energy to disappear, and most importantly, mysterious heavenly lightning. Fifth dimension calamity. The entire fifth dimension universe was rapidly dying. Yixin's complexion sank. At this time, Mu Nianyan suddenly smiled. Why should I prevent the fifth dimension calamity from coming? Hearing this, Bai Dizzy's pupils suddenly shrank, and a sense of uneasiness rose in her heart. Mu Nianyan looked around and softly said, I have suppressed it for so long and in fact I have reached my limit. There is not much difference between coming now and coming a few years later. As she said that, she suddenly coughed violently. Not only that, but her complexion had also become pale, and there was even a trace of blood at the corner of her mouth. Seeing this, Bai Dizzy was startled, and then he laughed. He had guessed correctly. Destroying the fifth dimension universe was equivalent to destroying Mu Nianyan. Because everything about Mu Nianyan originated from the fifth dimension universe. At this time, Yixin suddenly appeared next to Mu Nianyan. He grabbed Mu Nianyan's hand tightly. Sister, you rest a bit, I will handle the rest. Mu Nianyan shook her head. They came prepared, you are not them. Yixin suddenly roared angrily. Rest? Mu Nianyan looked at Yixin and saw that Yixin's eyes were red and glistening with tears. Yixin said with a trembling voice, Sister, can you believe in me? I will handle the rest, I will protect this universe, I can do it, you should rest well. Looking at Yixin's red eyes, Mu Nianyan's heart inexplicably softened. She gently wiped away the tears on Yixin's cheeks and softly smiled. Fool, you don't owe this universe anything. I suddenly regret letting you bear this responsibility. Will you blame me? Yixin hurriedly shook his head. No, it is only right and proper for me to help sister. Mu Nianyan roared with laughter, and then she pointed at the battle in the sky. Idiot, you should know that the Tao court won't let the matter rest today. Yixin held Mu Nianyan's hand tightly with both hands. I am not confident of winning, not at all. Mu Nianyan looked at Yixin. Then let me rest. Yixin grinned. I just think if we are going to die today, I want to die before you. Mu Nianyan's body stiffened, her hand unconsciously holding Yixin's hand tightly, and she forced a smile on her face. Why? Yixin looked at Mu Nianyan and grinned. If I die first, I won't feel heartache. Also, I will definitely die in Sister Nian's arms, right? Mu Nianyan looked at Yixin for a long time, then shook her head. You are so cruel. Saying that, she gently wiped away the tears on Yixin's face and softly smiled. If one day you are bullied, there will only be one reason, and that is because I am not here. And if one day you die, there will only be one reason, and that is because I am dead. Chapter 1337. By the lake, Yixin tightly held Mu Nianyan's hand and said with a smile, None of us will die. Mu Nianyan smiled but did not say anything. In the five-dimensional universe. At this time, the spiritual energy in the five-dimensional universe was gradually collapsing and natural disasters were unceasing. The earth split open and thick smoke rose. In the depths of the sea, volcanoes erupted and a large amount of magma gushed out. The magma covered the sea and then spread to the land. In the sky, lightning flashed and continuously trampled the earth. In this part of the universe, countless people were screaming in despair. Fifth dimension calamity. This was both a natural disaster and a man-made disaster. By the lake, Yixin tightly held Mu Nianyan's hand. Mu Nianyan's face was becoming increasingly pale. Clearly, the appearance of the fifth dimension calamity had a great impact on her. In the horizon, Bai Dizzy did not attack again. He was no longer in a hurry. Because the longer he delayed, the more advantageous it would be for him. This woman's strength was too heaven-defying. He needed to borrow the power of the five-dimensional universe to weaken Mu Nianyan. Otherwise, if he forcefully attacked, Doubting would suffer disastrous losses. Fortunately, this woman had a weakness. By the lake, Yixin looked at Mu Nianyan and said with a smile, "Sister, let me go first. You take a rest." Mu Nianyan looked at Yixin and faintly smiled. However, this smile seemed abnormally pale. "Okay." Yixin turned around and looked at the horizon. After a moment of silence, he suddenly said, "Today the fifth dimension calamity has arrived. It is both a natural disaster and a man-made disaster. I, Yixin, am willing to protect this part of the universe with my life. Is there anyone with me?" His voice was like thunder as it slowly spread throughout the universe. At this moment, countless experts in the five-dimensional universe heard Yixin's voice. Countless people raised their heads to look at the source of the voice. By the lake, Yixin quietly stood there. He was not sure how many people would come. Because it was easy to share wealth, but it was also easy to go through trials and tribulations together. Even husband and wife would fly away in the face of disaster. Not to mention that he not only had to face the fifth dimension calamity, but he also had to face the man-made disaster of doubting. How many people would come? Yixin was also at a loss. At this time, two women suddenly appeared beside Yixin, Lanxiu and Lian Wanli. The two girls glanced at Yixin and didn't say anything. Yixin didn't say anything. Suddenly, a ray of sword light resounded in the sky. In the next moment, a woman appeared in the sky. It was Arrow. Arrow stood proudly with his sword in hand. As soon as Arrow arrived, there was another flash of sword light. Then a woman appeared in the sky. Audiobook. Audiobook held a sword in her right hand and a wine gourd in her left. She reeked of wine. Beside Audiobook was a woman with a saber at her waist. It was Situ. In the sky, Bai Dizzy glanced at Arrow and the others and smiled. "Not bad, but is that all?" "Me too." Meanwhile, a voice suddenly resounded from the sky, and then a woman appeared above the clouds in the sky. "3 lives." Seeing 3 lives, Bai Dizzy said softly, "Dao sure." 3 lives glanced at Bai Dizzy, "Doubting are all beasts." Bai Dizzy frowned slightly, "Dao sure, you used to be one of us, but now." 3 lives suddenly said angrily, "Turi? Old dog Bai Di, tell me, is the current doubting still the doubting of the past?" Bai Dizzy shook his head. "There are many problems with the current doubting, but one day doubting will rebuild the order of the world and let the world return to how it was before. No, it will be better than before." 3 lives sneered, "Just because you people are blinded by greed." Bai Dizzy shook his head and smiled, then looked at Yixin. "Is there anyone else?" Yixin was silent. Up until now, only those close to him had come. As for the super experts he had nurtured, not a single one of them had come. Yixin slowly closed his eyes. Was it true that they could only share riches and not trials and tribulations? Right at this moment, numerous formidable auras suddenly appeared in the distant sky. In the next moment, numerous afterimages flashed over from the horizon. Yixin suddenly opened his eyes and looked at the horizon. More than 100 people had appeared. Among them, there were 26 true self-release realm experts, while the rest were only at the self-release realm. Almost all the self-release realm experts of the fifth dimension had come. At this moment, Jiang Yu, who was in the lead, smiled, "Not as fast as Lady Arrow and the others." Yixin said with a smile, "Do you know what we will face today?" Jiang Yu looked at Yixin. "If not for young Master Yi, we would never have been able to reach the self-release realm. Today, the fifth dimension is in trouble, young Master Yi is in trouble, so we will naturally do our best to help." Half of it was friendship and the other half was profit. In the horizon, Bai Dizzy looked at Yixin. "A disaster is approaching, yet there are still so many people willing to be with you. How rare." Yixin laughed, "Sacrifice the formation." As his voice fell, Old Li suddenly appeared and roared, "Go out." Bang. In an instant the entire world trembled. A huge formation covered the horizon. and the eye of the formation appeared under Yi Xian's feet. Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. All around him, the power contained in the formation flowed towards him like a river. This array contained the accumulated power of countless experts in the entire fifth dimension. As Yi Xian's power grew stronger, the world started to tremble. In a short time, Yi Xian's aura was no weaker than a Dao confirmation realm expert. However, Yi Xian still felt that it was not enough, so he took out 2 god seals. Bang! In an instant, a powerful aura swept out from Yi Xian's body like a tidal wave, and the entire world became illusory. Dao confirmation realm. At this moment, Yi Xian had truly reached the Dao confirmation realm. With the addition of the power of the formation, his strength was unprecedentedly powerful. In the starry sky, Bai Dizzy looked at Yi Xian in silence. It had to be said that he was somewhat shocked at this moment. In his opinion, the threat of Yi Xian would come in the future. Moon Yanyan was the biggest threat at present, but now it seemed that Yi Xian was a threat to doubting. In the distance, Yi Xian suddenly raised his head and looked at the formation in the depths of the starry sky. He knew that he had to solve this formation. Otherwise, the situation in the fifth dimension would become even worse. Yi Xian took a deep breath and opened his palm. The punishment heaven sword appeared in his hand. He looked at the depths of the starry sky, and the next moment, he held the sword with both hands and fiercely slashed. One sword to determine life and death. As the sword slashed out, the sound of the sword shook the heavens. At the same time, a wisp of sword chi pierced through the sky. Wherever the sword chi passed, the space was annihilated inch by inch. When this wisp of sword chi entered the starry sky, the entire starry sky lost its color. At this moment, there was only this sword in the world. But Bai Dizzy's expression was calm. In the depths of the starry sky, the 28 constellations suddenly separated. The next moment, a huge constellation formation appeared in front of the formation. This formation was the famous 4 constellations divine formation of doubting. It was once used to deal with the Dao tomb. On this formation, there were 28 kinds of constellation beast statues. East, Hornwood Dragon, Kong Gold Dragon, D Earth Raccoon Dog, Room Sun Rabbit, Heart Moon Fox, Tail Fire Tiger, Water Leopard of Winnowing Basket. North, Wood Fighting Dog, Golden Ox Nyo, Girl Earth Bat, Emptiness Sun Rat, Wei Moon Swallow, Room Fire Pig, Wall Water Centipede. West, Wood Wolf of Kuei, Golden Dog of Lu, Stomach Pheasant, Pleiades Sun Rooster, Moon Crow of Bai, Fire Monkey, Water Monkey of Shen. South, Wood Dragon of Well, Golden Goat of Ghost, Earth Deer of Willow, Sun Horse of Star, Moon Deer of Extended Net, Winged Fire Snake, Water Worm of Zhen. At this moment, the constellation divine formation was actually not complete. This was because the 28 constellation masters were not here. They were the Azure Dragon Master of the Eastern Constellation, the Black Tortoise Master of the Northern Constellation, the White Tiger Master of the Western Constellation, and the Vermilion Bird Master of the Southern Constellation. If the 4 constellation masters were here, the power of this formation could easily destroy more than a dozen Dao Defense Realm powerhouses. Even so, the power of this formation at this moment was still very terrifying. At this moment, Yi Xian's shocking sword slashed out. This sword slashed directly on the constellation divine formation. Boom! In an instant, a wave of sword light suddenly erupted from the depths of the starry sky. The sword light dissipated, but the constellation divine formation was still there. The formation behind the constellation divine formation was undamaged. Below, Yi Xian's expression became a little ugly. This sword attack had failed. Not only Yi Xian but the countless powerhouses of the fifth dimension below also had ugly expressions. The power of Yi Xian's sword attack just now was enough to destroy the heavens and the earth. However, this terrifying sword attack had been blocked by the great formation. Below, Yi Xian took a deep breath. Again? As his voice fell, he once again absorbed the power of the fifth dimension great formation. This time he directly absorbed the power of the great formation. Boom! The power contained within Yi Xian's body was unprecedentedly strong. Yi Xian looked at the constellation divine formation in the depths of the starry sky, and a fierce smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. He suddenly leaped into the depths of the starry sky, and then he slashed at the constellation divine formation with his sword. This sword attack used all of his strength. As the sword slashed down, the starry sky trembled. Boom! In the depths of the starry sky, an earth-shattering explosion suddenly resounded. Then, a wave of sword light erupted from the depths of the starry sky like dazzling fireworks. At this moment, a figure fell from the starry sky. It was Yi Xian. He had failed once again. After stopping, a wisp of blood flowed from the corner of Yi Xian's mouth. He wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and looked at the formation in the depths of the starry sky. His right hand tightly grasped the sword, and the blood in his body trembled. In the sky, Bai Dizzy looked down at Yi Xian. This formation was formed by 28 Dao confirmation realm powerhouses. Not to mention you, even 5 Dao controlling realm powerhouses wouldn't be able to do anything to this formation. Yi Xian said fiercely, I still want to try. After saying this, he suddenly stomped his right foot, and his entire body shot into the sky. The sword cry shook the heavens and the earth. Bai Dizzy paid no attention to Yi Xian, and he glanced at the surroundings with a trace of bewilderment in his eyes. Logically speaking, the fifth dimension tribulation should have erupted completely by now. However, even though there was a natural disaster in the fifth dimension, it hadn't completely erupted yet. What's going on? Bai Dizzy had a trace of bewilderment in his heart. Down below, Yi Jiming had suddenly appeared by Mu Nianyan's side. At this moment, Mu Nianyan seemed extremely weak, and her face was still pale like a sheet of paper. Her condition wasn't particularly good. Yi Jiming glanced at the surroundings and then he looked at Mu Nianyan. Mu Nianyan chuckled lightly. What did you see? Yi Jiming stared fixedly at Mu Nianyan. Was it you? Mu Nianyan smiled faintly, but her smile was pale. What was it, me? Yi Jiming suddenly walked in front of Mu Nianyan, and she grabbed Mu Nianyan's hand and slowly closed her eyes. After a moment, her eyes suddenly opened and she retreated rapidly. Her eyes were filled with disbelief and fear. My God. No. Impossible. This is absolutely impossible. You. P.S. Asking for votes. Chapter 1338. Yi Jiming seemed to have seen something, but he seemed to have lost his soul. He kept muttering, impossible. Mu Nianyan just smiled and did not say anything. She looked up at Yi Xian, who was still fighting in the sky. No one knew what she was thinking. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly opened his palm. The prison pagoda appeared in his hand. He roared, Dao laws return. Boom. The power of 9 Dao laws suddenly gathered in Yi Xian's body. At the same time, a powerful force directly enveloped the constellation Divine Formation. Yi Xian suddenly roared, imprison. As his voice fell, a blood-red imprison word suddenly floated above the constellation Divine Formation. Boom. In an instant, a blood-red light directly enveloped the entire constellation Divine Formation. At the same time, Yi Xian's 3 domains appeared at the same time. 3 domains plus the suppression of the prison pagoda. At this moment, the constellation Divine Formation was actually suppressed. Seeing this scene, Bai Dizzy slightly frowned. Revelation of the 5 directions. As his voice fell, 5 super experts suddenly appeared on the battle path. All 5 were at the peak of the Dao confirming realm. As soon as the 5 appeared, they directly rushed towards Yi Xian. At this moment, Arrow, Ajio, Situ, and Enlancio suddenly disappeared. The 4 directly blocked in front of the revelation of the 5 directions. Both sides did not waste any words and directly fought. Although Arrow and the other 3's realms were weaker than the revelation of the 5 directions, and they were 1 person short, the 4 women did not fall into a disadvantage against the revelation of the 5 directions. Below, 3 Lives originally wanted to help, but was stopped by Guanyin. She looked at 3 Lives. 3 Lives, we need you to help us block the Yin Qi of the underworld. Not only was the array in the depths of the starry sky destroying the 5-dimensional universe, there was also the Yin Qi and Death Qi from the Yin world. Even the spirit of Dark World found it hard to resist the Yin Qi and Death Qi. It should be said that only the spirit of Dark World could resist it a little. But now, the entire spirit of Dark World was resisting the Yin Qi and Death Qi from the Yin world. However, it was far from enough. In addition, there were still the experts from the Yin world who had yet to make a move. Therefore, 3 Lives had to stay behind to resist the Yin world. Right at this moment, a sword howl suddenly resounded from deep within the starry sky. Everyone looked up and saw Yi Xian's sword slash onto the constellation Divine Formation. Boom. A strand of light erupted once more in the starry sky. The enormous divine constellation formation trembled violently, and then Yi Xian was blasted back once more. However, cracks had appeared on the formation. Moreover, the divine constellation beasts had even become slightly illusory. It worked. Yi Xian was delighted when he witnessed this scene. He was just about to attack when a halberd suddenly tore through the air towards him. Yi Xian subconsciously slashed down with his sword. Bang! The halberd was slashed back, But Yi Xian himself was pushed back by over 100 m, and Divine General Xian Yong wasn't too far away from him. Is this person again? Yi Xian's expression sank. Right at this moment, a voice suddenly resounded from behind Yi Xian. Hey, do you still remember me? Yi Xian was slightly stunned when he heard this. He swiftly turned around and saw a woman standing in front of him. Jian Zizai. Yi Xian was slightly excited. Big sister Jian, what are you doing here? Jian Zizai roared with laughter. I knew you were in trouble, so I came. A trace of warmth flowed through Yi Xian's heart when he heard this. Meanwhile, Jian Zizai pointed at Xian Yong in the distance. I'll deal with this person. Yi Xian spoke in a low voice. Be careful, big sister Jian. Jian Zizai roared with laughter. Don't worry. As soon as she finished speaking, she vanished on the spot. In the distance, Xian Yong frowned slightly and stabbed out with his halberd, causing space to tremble and crack. However, Jian Zizai used his fist to forcefully receive the halberd. The power of his fist was not the slightest bit weaker than the halberd. Seeing this, Yi Xian relaxed. He turned to look at the constellation Divine Formation, and in the next moment he rushed over once again. He had to break these two formations, or the situation in the fifth dimension would only worsen, and Sister Nian's situation would also worsen. Seeing Yi Xian rush over once again, the constellation Divine Formation suddenly trembled. In the next moment, the 28 beast forms suddenly roared, and 28 powerful forces swept out. In the distance, Yi Xian's pupils suddenly shrank, and he suddenly slashed down with his sword. Boom! As the sword slashed down, Yi Xian instantly retreated hundreds of feet, but very quickly Yi Xian rushed out again. In the sky, Bai Dizzy did not pay attention to Yi Xian. Although Yi Xian was strong, there were 28 people in the 28 constellations, and they were also supported by the formation. No matter how heaven-defying Yi Xian was, it was impossible for him to kill the 28 constellations by himself. Bai Dizzy's gaze was always on Mu Niannian. The person he was most afraid of was this woman. At this time, Mu Niannian did not seem to have made a move. Moreover, although Mu Niannian looked pale, she was very calm. She had always been calm. Why was she so calm? Bai Dizzy suddenly looked to the right. Lord of the Underworld. At this time, the Lord of the Underworld appeared beside Bai Dizzy. The Lord of the Underworld glanced at Mu Niannian below, and there was a trace of fear in the depths of his eyes. Bai Dizzy said indifferently, "We can speed up." The Lord of the Underworld was silent. Bai Dizzy smiled. Don't worry, if Miss Mu makes a move, there will be people in doubting to restrain her. After a moment of silence, the Lord of the Underworld turned his head. Open. As his voice fell, on the other side of the starry sky, the space there suddenly split open. Then countless amounts of blood-red water suddenly gushed out from the split space. The water of the River of Forgetfulness. When the water of the River of Forgetfulness entered this world, the spiritual energy in this world began to dissipate at a terrifying speed. Seeing this scene, the expressions of the countless experts of the fifth dimension below changed. In addition, countless evil spirits suddenly rushed into the world of the living. After these evil spirits entered the world of the living, they began to crazily devour the yang energy and vitality of the world of the living. For a moment yin and yang were in chaos and heaven and earth were overturned. Below, Mu Niannian looked at all this calmly. After a moment she suddenly looked at Yi Jiming and smiled. Look how chaotic this world is. Yi Jiming looked at Mu Niannian, clenched his fists and did not say anything. At this time Mu Niannian suddenly disappeared. On the horizon Yi Xian stopped. When he turned around, Mu Niannian just happened to appear in front of him. Seeing Mu Niannian's face as pale as paper, Yi Xian felt very distressed. He tightly grasped Mu Niannian's hand. Mu Niannian looked around and softly said, "The 3,000 Grand Daos have already changed. At the very least, many of them have already changed. This has already gone against the original will of the Grand Daos. In this current world, people are not people, gods are not gods, ghosts are not ghosts." Yi Xian was silent. The Grand Daos. In the past, the Grand Daos were the order of the world. But now, the Grand Daos had already been used by someone. The ones in the wrong were not the Grand Daos, but the guardians of the Grand Daos. In the distance, Bai Dizzy looked at Mu Niannian. Logically speaking, the fifth dimension tribulation should have completely erupted, but it hasn't. It's all because of you. Mu Niannian smiled. Why don't you guess? Bai Dizzy shook his head. Young lady, I have to say you really surprised me. But now it's time to end this. As he said this, he looked at Yi Xian. According to our investigation, you seem to have many backers. But if you want to compare numbers and strength, how could you be a match for my doubting? As his voice fell on the battle path, an old man wearing a Taoist robe and holding a horsetail whisk suddenly appeared. Divine Monarch. When this divine monarch appeared, Yi Xian's expression instantly became solemn. After the divine monarch appeared, his gaze directly fell on Mu Nianyan's body. It was very clear that Bai Dizzy wanted to force Mu Nianyan to make a move. This was because as long as Mu Nianyan made a move, the destruction of this universe would accelerate. And as the destruction of this universe accelerated, Mu Nianyan's strength would become weaker and weaker. Bai Dizzy's goal was very simple. He wanted to use the smallest price to kill Mu Nianyan and Yi Xian. Because Doubting still had an enemy in the Dao Tomb, he couldn't sacrifice too much in the fifth dimension. Beside Mu Nianyan, Yi Xian suddenly took out a box. This was the box he obtained from the sword sect. Yi Xian was about to open the box when Mu Nianyan suddenly shook his head. Yi Xian looked at Mu Nianyan. Mu Nianyan smiled. It's useless. Yi Xian was a bit puzzled. Why? Mu Nianyan smiled. The little guy inside is not good at fighting. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, she can call for help. Mu Nianyan shook his head and smiled. It's useless. The people who can change all of this are very far away from here. Moreover, letting the fifth dimension come early was my choice. Yi Xian's face was filled with shock. What? Mu Nianyan said in a soft voice, because what will come will come. The reason why I suppressed the fifth dimension is because I was waiting for someone who can deal with the aftermath. After saying that, she looked at Yi Xian and smiled. I've waited for you. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, Sister Nian, can't the fifth dimension be suppressed forever? Mu Nianyan shook her head and smiled. It can't. Moreover, the longer I suppress it, the greater the rebound. If I continue to suppress it, the rebound will be very terrifying in the future. It might even be something this universe can't bear. As she spoke, she turned to look at the universe and said softly, actually, this universe is already riddled with holes. I couldn't bear it and forcefully extended its life. But I know that in order to completely preserve this universe, the only way is to destroy the living beings in this universe. However, the living beings in this universe are also a part of this universe. Moreover, if these creatures were destroyed, there would be more to come. There would be new life forms. Destruction still could not cure the root of the problem. The only way is for the living beings of this universe to treat this universe well and coexist with it. In the distance, Bai Dizzy suddenly laughed and said, I'm afraid that this young lady's idea will never come true. Mu Nianyan laughed and looked at the Divine Emperor. The peak of the Dao defense realm, half a step to that level. It seems like Doubting still thinks highly of me. The Divine Sovereign looked at Mu Nianyan. Please enlighten me. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly disappeared. At this moment, Mu Nianyan shook her head and smiled. She gently stretched out her right hand and pointed with a finger. Boom. In an instant, a figure retreated rapidly in the sky. This retreat was no less than 10,000 feet. Not only that, the Divine Sovereign's physical body actually disappeared. Seeing this scene, Bai Dizzy's expression changed. Yi Xian was also stunned. Although she destroyed the Divine Sovereign's physical body with one punch, Mu Nianyan coughed a few times. Moreover, she coughed up blood. Most importantly, the entire world seemed to have become somewhat illusory. The fifth dimension calamity seemed to have sped up. It was obvious that every time she attacked, it was a disaster for this universe. Mu Nianyan looked down and shook her head. Now is not the time to fully erupt. I have to leave some time for you, little fellow. As soon as she finished speaking, she pressed her left hand down lightly. In an instant, the fifth dimension gradually calmed down. At this moment, Bai Dizzy seemed to have discovered something. Her pupils suddenly shrank. You have been using your own strength to suppress this fifth dimension. Mu Nianyan glanced at Bai Dizzy and smiled. You just realized? Bai Dizzy trembled. How much of your strength have you used to suppress the fifth dimension? The corners of Mu Nianyan's mouth curled up. Take a guess. At this moment, everyone present was stunned. Mu Nianyan was using her own strength to suppress the fifth dimension. What did this mean? It meant that the current her was not at her peak state. Yi Xian trembled. Sister Nian, how much strength have you used to suppress the entire fifth dimension? 70%. At this moment, Yi Jiming, who was not far away, suddenly spoke. She stared at Mu Nianyan. For countless years, she has been using 70% of her strength to suppress this fifth dimension. Her current strength is only 30% of her peak state. It's not even 30%. Yi Jiming's voice trembled. Everyone present was stunned, including Yi Xian. Not even 30% of her peak state was already so terrifying. If Sister Nian withdrew her 70%, how terrifying would it be? Up in the sky, the White Emperor's son was also stunned. 30%. Heavens! The woman in front of him had only used 30% of her strength to kill a divine monarch. 30%. How was this possible? Bai Dizzy held an important position in the doubting world. What kind of experts had he not seen in his life? But at this moment he was panicking. He was really panicking. The Lord of the Underworld no longer had fear in his eyes. Was fear. True fear. There was actually such a terrifying expert in this world. 30% of her strength. In the distance, Yi Jiming looked at Moon Yanyan. No wonder you said that no medicine could heal your injuries. Your injuries were not caused by others but by yourself. No, you are not injured at all. You are using your life to prolong the life of this fifth dimension. Moon Yanyan smiled faintly. Her smile was still a little pale. What a smart girl. Yi Jiming stared at Moon Yanyan. As long as you give up on the fifth dimension, not only will you recover, you will also be invincible in this world. Moon Yanyan shook her head and smiled. My injuries will recover. However, this fifth dimension will collapse in an instant. As for being invincible in this world, after those 3 swords leave this world, I will indeed be invincible. And no, this is too arrogant. I have to keep a low profile. Everyone, Yi Jiming looked at Moon Yanyan. If you don't give up on the fifth dimension, you will die. Moon Yanyan smiled and looked at Yi Xian. I will do one last thing for you. After saying that, she pulled Yi Xian's hand and appeared on the battle path. Yi Xian said with a trembling voice, Sister Nian, what are you going to do? Moon Yanyan's lips curled up. To doubting. Yi Xian, in the distance, Bai Dizzy said with a trembling voice, arrogant. Woman, you only have 30% of your strength. You dare you. On the battle path, Moon Yanyan laughed without turning her head. So what if it's 30%? With 30%, I, Moon Yanyan, will still be invincible in this world. Chapter 1339. Invincible in the world. This sentence floated between heaven and earth. No one thought that Moon Yanyan was boasting. She could kill a divine monarch with 30% of her strength. This strength could not be described with words. If Moon Yanyan was willing to give up the fifth dimension, how terrifying would she be at her peak? It was unimaginable. Even the White Emperor's son, the Star Lord of the Tao Court, could not have imagined it. At this moment, Yi Xian, who was on the fight path, suddenly stopped. Moon Yanyan looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian grinned and said with a trembling voice, Sister Nian, let's let doubting go. Moon Yanyan smiled, I won't die. Yi Xian shook his head and held Moon Yanyan's hand tightly. You know, I have practiced Buddhism. Buddhism is merciful. Let's let doubting go. Moon Yanyan smiled gently. You are afraid that I will die? Yi Xian nodded. Moon Yanyan smiled. Besides your Qing, no one can kill me. Yi Xian looked at Moon Yanyan and said firmly, I won't go doubting. Moon Yanyan smiled. It's really fine. Yi Xian shook his head and said with a trembling voice, Sister Nian, I also know how to trick people, don't trick me. Moon Yanyan was silent. Yi Xian looked at Moon Yanyan and was about to speak when Moon Yanyan suddenly said, Doubting will not let you go. Yi Xian said, I know, but we won't go doubting today. Moon Yanyan looked at Yi Xian for a moment and said with a smile, I promise you I will not die. Sister Nian has never made a promise to anyone, but this time I promise you. Just as Yi Xian was about to speak, Moon Yanyan smiled and said, Doubting I must go. Not only for you but also for a wish of mine. I've always wanted to have a real fight. Unfortunately, your Qing is too strong. I'm afraid I'll be killed if I fight her. Doubting is the only way. Moreover, if I can't come back alive, why would I bring you along? Am I supposed to bring you along to die? Idiot. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he said, Really? Moon Yanyan nodded. I promise you we will definitely come back alive. As she spoke, she seemed to have thought of something. She turned her head to look at the Lord of the Underworld, who was not far away. The latter's expression changed greatly, and just as he was about to retreat, Moon Yanyan pointed a finger at him. Boom. The space where the Lord of the Nether Realm stood exploded, and the Lord of the Nether Realm was instantly killed. Moon Yanyan raised her head to look at the path in front of her, and then she smiled and said, Let's go. Let's go take a look at doubting. As soon as she finished speaking, she pulled Yi Xian along as she walked towards the end of the path. Along the way, Moon Yanyan ceaselessly sized up the surroundings, and her face was filled with a smile, even though it was a very pale smile. In next to no time, Mu Nianyan and Yi Xian vanished at the end of the path. The White Emperor's disciples suddenly vanished along with the 28 lunar mansions. Suddenly, Mu Nianyan and Yi Xian appeared in front of an enormous heaven gate. Doubting Heaven Gate. This gate was 300 m long and wide, and it was the main entrance to Doubting. As soon as Mu Nianyan and Yi Xian appeared before the main entrance, 4 guardian generals suddenly appeared in front of Mu Nianyan, and then the guardian general shouted furiously, "Who dares trespass into the Heaven Gate?" Just at this moment, Mu Nianyan suddenly vanished on the spot. A strand of sword light flashed through the battlefield. 4 bloody heads flew into the air and blood splattered everywhere. It was an instant kill. Mu Nianyan turned to look at Yi Xian and she smiled mischievously. "Isn't it amazing?" Yi Xian gave a thumbs up. "Sister Nian is invincible." Mu Nianyan laughed and then she pointed at the Heaven Gate. "This is the Doubting Heaven Gate, and behind this gate is the legendary 36 heavens. The higher you go, the denser the innate spiritual energy is, and the closer you are to the Milky Way, the denser the star essence is. It can be said that there are very few places in the world that can compare to Doubting in terms of spiritual energy." Yi Xian was about to speak, but Bai Dizzy suddenly appeared in front of Mu Nianyan, and there were 4 people behind him. The 4 divine generals of Doubting. These 4 people were not in the Dao validation realm, but the peak of the Dao defense realm. Mu Nianyan chuckled. "Just the 4 of them?" Bai Dizzy looked at Mu Nianyan. "Miss, we have no intention of offending the 5-dimensional universe. Is it worth it for you to be enemies with the Doubting for a human? Is it worth it?" Mu Nianyan shook her head and smiled. "You have to understand that it is you who has always been enemies with us." Bai Dizzy looked at Mu Nianyan. "If he is willing to hand over the Dao scripture, the Doubting will not kill him. From now on, the Doubting and the 5-dimensional universe will mind our own business." Mu Nianyan suddenly turned to look at Yi Xian. "Remember, never trust the enemy." Yi Xian said in a deep voice, "I understand." "Trust the enemy? How retarded would that be?" Mu Nianyan looked at Bai Dizzy and smiled. "If he hands over the Dao scripture, he will temporarily keep his life. However, the Doubting will still think of a way to kill him, right?" White Emperor. Z was silent. In fact, the Doubting, Yi Xian and Mu Nianyan could not be friendly. Whether it was Mu Nianyan or Yi Xian, the Doubting would not let them go. Those who posed a threat to them had to be exterminated by the roots. If the Doubting had been more ruthless, the Dao tomb would not have appeared. If the roots were not eliminated, Yi Xian and Mu Nianyan would be a disaster in the future. Mu Nianyan suddenly looked at the 4 divine generals. The 4 divine generals were about to attack when Bai Dizzy suddenly said, "Stand down." The 4 heavenly kings did not hesitate and retreated to the side. Bai Dizzy looked at Mu Nianyan. "The purpose of this trip can't be to destroy the Doubting, right?" Mu Nianyan smiled. "What do you think?" Bai Dizzy was silent for a moment and then respectfully retreated to the side. At this time, a middle-aged man suddenly appeared in front of Mu Nianyan. This person was the Doubting's current Dao ancestor. The Doubting's strongest expert. The Doubting was not stupid enough to send an ordinary expert to deal with Mu Nianyan. What? Because doing so would be sending them to their deaths. This Mu Nianyan could even kill a god monarch in a second. Sending someone else would only be sending them to their deaths, making the Doubting's losses even greater. Therefore, when Bai Dizzy returned to the Doubting, he immediately informed the Dao ancestor. Mu Nianyan was worthy of the Doubting's strongest expert. The Dao ancestor appeared. Only the Dao ancestor personally took action could prevent the Doubting from losing any experts. Otherwise it would be useless to send anyone else. This woman was really too strong. After the Dao ancestor appeared, he looked at Mu Nianyan and smiled. "The purpose of your trip is not to destroy the Doubting but to find me." Mu Nianyan smiled. "Why do you say that?" The Dao ancestor pointed at Yi Xian. "Although this person has the calamity cause, his fate is extremely strong. In the entire Doubting, the only person who has 100% chance of breaking his fate is me. Therefore your target is me." The smile on Mu Nianyan's face gradually disappeared. Yi Xian looked at Mu Nianyan. Mu Nianyan smiled. "As expected of the Dao ancestor. You can see the problem at a glance." The Dao ancestor looked at Mu Nianyan. "With 30% of your strength you can kill a divine lord. You surprised me but you can't kill me. Therefore, I guess you want to seriously injure me." Mu Nianyan smiled. "Do you think I can do it?" The Dao ancestor looked down and said, "If you are willing to give up the 5th dimension and let yourself be in a peak state, I will be wary of you. Your current state." Saying this, he shook his head. "You can't do it." Moon Yin laughed. I'll try. The Tao ancestor nodded. Then let's try. Moon Yin opened her palm and a sword appeared in her hand. The next moment she suddenly attacked. This sword stabbed towards the Tao ancestor. It was a very calm sword. Even the world's top swordsman Yi Xian could not see what was special about this sword. Opposite of Moon Yin, the Tao ancestor squinted his eyes. There was a trace of seriousness in his eyes. When the sword arrived in front of him, he suddenly pointed with his fingers. This point directly touched the tip of the sword. There were no energy fluctuations. Everything was very calm. Gradually, the Tao ancestor's body started to become illusory. Not far away, the White Emperor's son's expression changed drastically. At this moment, Moon Yin suddenly retracted her sword. A smile appeared on her face. The Tao ancestor looked at Moon Yin. His body became more and more illusory. At this moment, Moon Yin suddenly disappeared. She raised her sword and attacked. Bai Dizzy's expression changed. He looked at the Tao ancestor. The Tao ancestor said softly, "Let her kill." Soon, Moon Yin killed her way to the 33rd heaven. All the heavenly generals in the 33rd heaven were killed. At the entrance of the 34th heaven, Moon Yin suddenly stopped. She looked at the entrance for a long time and then turned to leave. In front of the heavenly gate, Moon Yin held Yi Xian's hand and said with a smile, "Let's go." Yi Xian was stunned. It was over? At this moment, the Tao ancestor suddenly said, "You injured me. Even if I don't attack, I doubting someone can still kill him. So what's your next move?" Moon Yin said with a smile, "You'll know soon." With that, she pulled Yi Xian and disappeared from the southern heavenly gate. At this moment, a heavenly general suddenly appeared in front of the Tao ancestor. The heavenly general knelt on one knee. "Tao ancestor, the army of the Tao tomb has invaded. The leader is Luo Ho." Hearing this, the Tao ancestor narrowed his eyes and said softly, "This is your next move," Bai Dizzy said in a deep voice. "Tao ancestor, if this woman is not killed, I doubting the future." The Tao ancestor suddenly said, "She's already dead." Bai Dizzy suddenly looked up, his eyes filled with disbelief. Under the southern heavenly gate, Moon Yin and Yi Xian walked slowly. Yi Xian glanced at Moon Yin. On the surface Moon Yin looked fine. But for some reason Yi Xian felt uneasy. Moon Yin suddenly smiled and said, "The Tao ancestor was crippled by me. Yes. He must heal in a short period of time because he didn't dare to not heal. He didn't dare to let himself be injured when facing the person in the Tao tomb. Just now, I slaughtered all the experts in the 33 heavens. This is what I promised others. In return, the Tao tomb will send out troops. At this time, the doubting will not care about you because the threat of the Tao tomb will be greater. Simply put, you now have at least half a year." Saying that, she looked at Yi Xian and smiled. "Remember, although the Tao tomb and the doubting are sworn enemies, they are still not trustworthy. Tao breakers want the Tao scriptures more than the doubting because the complete Tao scriptures can restrain the doubting. Therefore, the Tao tomb should not cooperate with them if you can because most of the time, they are more terrifying than the doubting. Even if you cooperate with them, you must be careful." Yi Xian was about to speak, but Moon Yin smiled and said, "Let me finish. You only have half a year, maybe not even half a year. And in this half a year, if you want to reach the Tao testimony realm, you must reach the Tao testimony realm. Of course, even if you reach the Tao testimony realm, you can't fight against the Tao tomb and the doubting alone. Therefore you must find the Tao scriptures, gather all of them and awaken the great Tao spirit so that it can help you. Remember, no matter what method you use, you must let the great Tao spirit help you." Saying that, she coughed and then continued, "In the 3,000 great Taos, not all the great Tao protectors are bad. There are also many good ones. You can befriend those good great Tao protectors or you can find a way to obtain more God seals. You are now the Lord of the five-dimensional universe, so as long as you can make the creatures of the five-dimensional universe sincerely submit to you, they will believe in you and follow your great Tao laws. This way your strength will increase and the more God seals you have, the stronger you will be." Just as Yi Xian was about to speak, Moon Yin continued, "A long time ago the world was in chaos. The sky tilted to the northwest and the earth sank to the southeast. The great Tao was not complete, so an expert used a 5-colored divine stone to repair the world, and the 3 lives technique was one of them. She didn't know how terrifying she was. Furthermore, this girl's temperament isn't bad and she trusts you. You can cultivate her 3 lives art. This art is indeed only inferior to the Tao scripture's mental cultivation method. After you cultivate the 3 lives art, you will obtain the power of 3 lives. This power can fuse with your sword Tao, allowing it to reach a new height. This is because the three lives technique itself is a kind of great Tao. Saying that, she paused for a moment, then continued, there is also Yi Jiming. She comes from the Great Abyss, a group of sinners from the ancient God era. They also want the Tao scriptures because they can wash away their sins and allow them to escape. Yi Jiming follows you for this purpose. I have observed this girl and her feelings for you are a bit complicated. You must be on guard against her because in the future, it is very likely that she will choose to abandon you for her family. Of course, it is also possible that she will abandon her people for you. In any case, you must be on your guard and not fall into her trap. Just as Yi Xian was about to speak, Mu Niannian continued, the Lord of the Underworld has already been destroyed by me. Right now, the Underworld is like a group of dragons without a leader. You can take over the Underworld and rule over those ghosts, but you must be careful. In the 18 levels of the Underworld there is a Tao Breaker. This person is extremely powerful, and I originally wanted to kill him to get rid of a hidden danger for you. However, this person is also a pitiful person, and he has never had any ill intentions towards you, so I spared his life. Saying that, she looked at Yi Xian and smiled, remember in the future you must think twice before you act. There is nothing wrong with thinking more and being more cautious. Especially now you must learn to hide your strength. Right now you have not reached the point where those forces will stop at nothing to kill you, but if you show off a bit more they will stop at nothing to kill you. Yi Xian said with a trembling voice, Sister Nian, why are you saying this to me? Mu Niannian smiled, because I'm already dead. After saying that she suddenly went limp. Yi Xian's expression changed greatly and he hurriedly hugged Mu Niannian and said with a trembling voice, Sister Nian, you were fine, what nonsense are you talking about? Mu Niannian reached out and gently wiped away the tears on Yi Xian's cheeks. Don't blame yourself, don't be sad because this is my own choice. I have protected the fifth dimension for countless years, and I have long been exhausted. I am already very satisfied to be able to meet you in my final moments. However, from now on you will really have to walk alone. Also, after I die, bring me back to the fifth dimension, and then bury my body in the starry sky of the fifth dimension. My soul will scatter between heaven and earth. I was born in the fifth dimension, so naturally when I die I will naturally die in the fifth dimension. Also, when the time comes, remember to cook a few roasted fish for me? No. Yi Xian tightly hugged Mu Niannian, sobbing uncontrollably. Mu Niannian gently stroked Yi Xian's cheek with her left hand, feeling a little heartache. Before, I was not afraid of death at all because a long time ago, I had already thought of this ending. But now I am a little afraid of death. Because I am afraid that after I die, there will be no one to protect you. But, Sister Nian is really tired, Sister Nian wants to have a good rest. As her voice fell, her breath was almost gone. Finally, Mu Niannian turned her head and looked at the fifth dimension that she had protected for countless years. The corners of her mouth curled up slightly. This was the last time she smiled. It was also the last time she saw it. Now she could finally rest. P.S. Asking for tickets. Chapter 1340. In the starry sky, Yi Xian tightly hugged Mu Niannian, sobbing like a child. In his embrace, Mu Niannian had already stopped breathing. As if he had thought of something, Yi Xian took out all the violet energy he had for Mu Niannian to absorb. However, it was useless. The moment the violet energy entered Mu Niannian's body, it automatically dispersed. Seeing this, Yi Xian sat paralyzed in the starry sky. His eyes were empty as if he had lost his soul. At this time, a white figure suddenly appeared not far away from Yi Xian. This white figure was Linger, who had been following Mu Niannian all this time. Yi Xian suddenly looked at Linger. She didn't die, right? Linger held Mu Niannian's hand and softly said, she is already dead. Yi Xian's voice trembled. How? How is that possible? Sister Nian is so strong. She only used 30% of her strength to seriously injure a Tao ancestor. How could she die? Impossible? Linger glanced at Yi Xian. On her face, 2 streams of clear liquid slowly flowed. 90,000 years. She used her body to suppress the fifth dimension for 90,000 years. Every time the fifth dimension tribulation came, she was the one who endured it. Although she suppressed the fifth dimension tribulation, she suffered a backlash. Yi Xian tightly hugged Mu Niannian. His body could not stop trembling. How could you be so stupid? Linger softly said, just like she said, this was her own choice. She chose death. For you, for the fifth dimension. Yi Xian looked at Linger. Linger wiped the tears on her face. In fact, the fifth dimension tribulation can no longer be suppressed. The more it is suppressed, the greater the backlash will be in the future. Therefore, she chose to let the fifth dimension tribulation come early. With that, she looked down and softly said, "The reason why the fifth dimension tribulation has not completely erupted is because she is suppressing it." In other words, she withstood at least 90% of the fifth dimension tribulation's power. You saw her weak before not because she made a move, but because her body was withstanding the fifth dimension tribulation. Yi Xian looked at Linger. She could withstand it before, so why couldn't she withstand it this time? Linger looked at Yi Xian. Because this time there is a man-made disaster. Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes. Doubting. Linger continued, "You don't need to blame yourself too much. This is her choice. She chose to save the fifth dimension. If she doesn't choose the five-dimensional universe, the Tao court won't be able to do anything to her. If she doesn't give up on the five-dimensional universe, her injuries will only worsen." Yi Xian shook his head. "You're wrong." Linger looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian said softly, "She went to Doubting for me. If she didn't go to Doubting, she wouldn't have died, right?" Linger looked at Yi Xian. She clenched her fists as tears poured out of her eyes. It's you. If not for you, she wouldn't have died." With that, she suddenly knelt down in front of Moon Yanyan's body. She clutched Moon Yanyan tightly and wailed, "You fool! I've already told you to stay out of his business, but you just wouldn't listen. He's a person with a calamity cause." At the side, Yi Xian's eyes were empty as if he had lost his soul. 2 streams of clear liquid flowed down his face. Linger suddenly looked at Yi Xian. She stared at Yi Xian. "Do you know why she went to Doubting? Because she wanted to buy time for you. And now she used her life to buy time for you for half a year. If not for you, although she would have been seriously injured, she wouldn't have died. You're the one who killed her." Yi Xian hugged Moon Yanyan tightly. I'm sorry. Linger still wanted to say something. At this time, Yi Xian's black hair began to turn white. In just a few breaths, Yi Xian's black hair had turned snow white. Seeing this, Linger was stunned. She didn't say anything. At this time, Yi Xian suddenly picked up Moon Yanyan. He gently stroked Moon Yanyan's messy hair and grinned. "Sister Nyan, let's go home. Back to the five-dimensional universe." Yi Xian carried Moon Yanyan's body and walked down. Yi Xian brought Moon Yanyan's body to the five-dimensional universe. After arriving in the five-dimensional universe, Moon Yanyan's body gradually became illusory. In her body, a force spread out and finally dissipated between heaven and earth like a light breeze. That was Moon Yanyan's soul power. Yi Xian wanted to catch it, but it was impossible, not even with the soul-suppressing sword. In Little Soul's words, this soul has dispersed. After Moon Yanyan's soul dispersed between heaven and earth, her body suddenly changed. In the end, the Moon Yanyan in Yi Xian's arms turned into a pure white kitten. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian was stunned. At this moment, he finally understood why Moon Yanyan liked to eat fish so much. Yi Xian brought Moon Yanyan to the starry sky where she often roasted fish. It was very quiet here. He placed Moon Yanyan's body in the starry sky. From this position, he could overlook the five-dimensional universe below. The body was buried in the starry sky, the soul returned to heaven and earth. Yi Xian looked at Moon Yanyan. After a long time, he smiled and said, "Sister Nyan, have a good rest." With that, he turned and left. And he was not going back to the five-dimensional universe. On the side, Linger said with a trembling voice, "Where are you going?" Yi Xian did not turn his head. Linger was about to say something when a black object suddenly fell in front of her. Prison pagoda. Yi Xian left behind the prison pagoda. What was he going to do? Linger was somewhat confused. At this time, Big Sister's voice suddenly sounded from inside the prison pagoda. "Not good, he's going to do something stupid. Quickly stop him." Linger was stunned. Then she hurriedly chased after him. However, Yi Xian had already disappeared into the starry sky. Linger angrily roared at the starry sky, "You're going to die." In the depths of the starry sky, a voice slowly floated over, "Then die." Yi Xian once again arrived in front of the heavenly gate. One person, one sword. Just as Yi Xian arrived in front of the heavenly gate, Bai Dizzy appeared in front of him. Bai Dizzy looked at the white-haired Yi Xian and shook his head. "Stupid! Haven't you heard that 10 years is not too late for a gentleman to take revenge? Coming here now is very stupid." 10 years? Yi Xian grinned. "This daddy can't wait that long." As his voice fell, a blood-red aura suddenly swept out from his body. Bang! In an instant, the sky above the heavenly gate turned blood red. Bloodline activation. At this moment, Yi Xian completely entered a crazed state. This time he did not rely on the sword spirit. Kill. That was the only thought in Yi Xian's mind. After he completely activated the power of the bloodline, the sword spirit in his hand also turned blood red at this moment. Usually he was unable to unleash the sword spirit's power. However, after the bloodline activation he could unleash at least 30% of the sword spirit's power. The crazier the owner of this sword, the stronger it was. Seeing Yi Xian's aura skyrocket, Bai Dizzy frowned slightly. The power of the bloodline was a little beyond his expectations. At this moment, a man suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. This person was God General Shen Yong. Looking at the blood-red Yi Xian, Shen Yong gradually frowned. At this moment Yi Xian made him feel danger. The stronger the murderous intent, the stronger the power of the bloodline. At this moment Yi Xian's murderous intent had never been so strong. Kill. At this moment, only killing intent remained in Yi Xian's mind. Yi Xian suddenly vanished on the spot. Shen Yong's eyes narrowed slightly as he stabbed his halberd forward. Bang! An expanse of blood-red light suddenly erupted, and then Shen Yong was instantly pushed over 1 kilometer back. As soon as he stopped moving, the halberd in his hand had suddenly cracked apart. Bai Dizzy frowned slightly when he witnessed this scene. Shen Yong gazed at Yi Xian with a trace of disbelief in his eyes. Suddenly Yi Xian roared furiously, "Kill!" As soon as he finished speaking, a ray of blood-red light suddenly arrived in front of Shen Yong. Shen Yong's eyes narrowed slightly as he raised his halberd to block it. Bang! An explosion resounded as Shen Yong was pushed 3 kilometers back. This time, the halberd in his hand had been slashed into pieces. Shen Yong raised his head to gaze at Yi Xian. In the end, his gaze descended onto the sword in Yi Xian's grasp. What sort of sword is that? It was actually able to shatter me? Right at this moment, Yi Xian vanished on the spot again. Shen Yong's pupils constricted, and then he clenched his right hand into a fist and smashed it forward. At the instant he punched forward, the space in front of him had instantly transformed into a strange vortex. A strand of obliterating energy swept out from within the vortex, and it collided head-on with Yi Xian's blood-red ray of light. Rumble. An expanse of blood-red light suddenly erupted from the heaven entrance, and then a figure retreated repeatedly. It was Shen Yong. Shen Yong hadn't even stopped moving when Yi Xian slashed once more. A wisp of ferocity flashed through Shen Yong's eyes, and then he clenched his fists tightly and smashed them forward. Rumble. The space in the surroundings suddenly trembled violently while Shen Yong instantly retreated explosively. At this moment, his strength had been directly suppressed by the energy of Yi Xian's bloodline and sword Dao. Bai Dizzy's face fell when he witnessed this scene. He noticed that Yi Xian's aura was growing stronger and stronger. What sort of bloodline is this? Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly vanished with his blood-red sword in hand. Bai Dizzy's expression changed drastically and he hurriedly said, "Watch out." On the other side, Shen Yong seemed to have sensed something, and his pupils had suddenly constricted to the size of needles. He swiftly swept his arms forward, and a strand of formidable force swept out from within him like a volcanic eruption. Using defense as offense. Meanwhile, 2 mysterious forces suddenly enveloped the surroundings. The sword domain and blood domain. The sword domain and blood domain were countless times stronger than before. Especially the blood domain. After Yi Xian activated the energy of his bloodline, the blood domain was unprecedentedly strong. A strand of blood-red ray of light suddenly slashed down from within the blood domain. The energy that Shen Yong had released was directly shattered by this sword. At the same time, Yi Xian's sword slashed directly into the top of Shen Yong's head, and Shen Yong's body was directly cut into 2. Shen Yong's soul was just about to flee when the sword in Yi Xian's hand had suddenly transformed into the soul-quelling sword, and the soul-quelling sword directly entered the space between the brows of Shen Yong's soul. Bang! Shen Yong's formidable soul was directly absorbed. A sword slashed through the body. A sword slashed through the soul. Yi Xian gestured with his right hand, and the soul-quelling sword flew back into his hand. Then he raised the sword and killed his way into the heaven gate without looking back. Behind him was a sea of blood. Killing intent arose and the world was slaughtered. If he didn't go mad, he wouldn't survive. Chapter 1341. In front of the heavenly gate, Bai Dizzy looked at the dismembered Shen Yong with an extremely ugly expression. He did not expect that Yi Xian would become so powerful after activating the power of his bloodline. He had killed a divine general. At this moment, Bai Dizzy's eyes were solemn. The Doubting was currently empty because Luo Ho had personally led the army of the Dao Tomb, so most of the experts of the Doubting had gone to the celestial abyss. As if he had thought of something, Bai Dizzy suddenly said, "Quickly recall the 4 heavenly kings." A voice rang out behind Bai Dizzy. "Yes, sir." At this moment, a heavenly general suddenly appeared in front of Bai Dizzy. He bowed respectfully and said in a trembling voice, "Sir, Yi Xian has already killed his way into the first heaven." Hearing this, Bai Dizzy narrowed his eyes and was about to speak when another heavenly general appeared in front of Bai Dizzy. "Sir, Yi Xian has already killed his way into the 6th heaven." Bai Dizzy was speechless. At this moment, Yi Xian had already killed his way into the 11th heaven. In fact, there was originally a super expert guarding each of the 36 heavens. However, Mu Niannian had already killed the expert guarding the 36 heavens. In addition, most of the super experts of the Doubting were in the celestial abyss, so Yi Xian was almost invincible along the way. He killed his way to the 11th heaven, and during this period he had killed at least 1,000 heavenly generals. They were all instant kills. At this moment, the power of his sword was difficult to resist even for Dao confirmation experts. Soon Yi Xian killed his way to the 20th heaven, and at this moment, the experts he encountered were all Dao confirmation experts. However, these Dao confirmation experts were still unable to stop him. Mu Niannian only killed the strongest experts of each heaven, but Yi Xian was different. He killed everyone he saw. Could be said that he had killed almost all the experts of each heaven. Under such a massacre, Yi Xian's killing intent grew stronger and stronger. Just as Yi Xian arrived at the 21st heaven, Bai Dizzy suddenly appeared in front of him. Bai Dizzy stared at Yi Xian. At this moment he was extremely shocked, because he noticed that Yi Xian's aura was at least twice as strong as when he was in the heavenly gate. This guy was getting stronger and stronger. How could this be? Bai Dizzy looked at Yi Xian. Soon he discovered the crux of the problem. The power of bloodline. Yi Xian's bloodline power was getting stronger and stronger. What kind of bloodline power was this? Bai Dizzy frowned slightly. He'd investigated Yi Xian earlier, but he'd neglected Yi Xian's bloodline. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly looked at Bai Dizzy. He was about to attack when a furious shout resounded from afar, "How dare you!" As soon as the voice resounded, a ray of black light flashed. Yi Xian turned around and slashed down with his sword. Bang! That black light directly exploded, and Yi Xian also retreated more than 100 feet. A robust middle-aged man stood in front of Yi Xian. The middle-aged man wore golden armor, held a golden hammer in his left hand, and held an umbrella in his right. It was one of the 4 heavenly kings of Doubting, Multilore. Bai Dizzy frowned slightly when he saw Multilore. "Multilore, why are you alone?" Multilore glanced at Bai Dizzy. "Star-Lord, the battle at the celestial abyss is very intense." Bai Dizzy's face sank when he heard this. Meanwhile, Multilore looked at Yi Xian. "I alone am enough to kill this kid." Bai Dizzy looked at Multilore. "Don't be careless and underestimate him." Multilore laughed. "I know." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly leaped up and smashed his hammer down at Yi Xian. The 22 levels of the celestial abyss trembled violently like an earthquake, and it was extremely shocking. Yi Xian suddenly raised his head, and his eyes were like a sea of blood that struck fear into the hearts of others. Yi Xian didn't dodge and he just stabbed with his sword. In an instant, a blood technique drowned him in Multilore. Bang! Along with a loud bang that shook the heavens, a figure retreated rapidly, and he retreated for an entire 300 m. It was Yi Xian. Within that bloody light, Multilore casually swung his hammer, and the bloody light was instantly dispersed. Multilore looked into the distance and sneered, "This kid has some ability to actually be able to take my punch head-on." Again. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly vanished on the spot, and in the next moment, a golden hammer suddenly smashed down from above Yi Xian's head. Under this hammer strike, the space around Yi Xian directly warped. Yi Xian suddenly raised his head and roared furiously. A bloody light shot into the sky from his body, and this bloody light actually forcefully blocked that shocking hammer strike. Multilore's expression changed at the sight of this. What kind of bloodline power is this? At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly vanished on the spot. Multilore's eyes narrowed slightly, and he suddenly swung his hammer horizontally to the side. Bang! A bloody light suddenly exploded from the golden hammer, and Multilore instantly retreated explosively. At this moment, Yi Xian pressed forward, and in an instant, countless bloody sword lights drowned Multilore. Boom! Boom! Boom. Explosions resounded incessantly in the 21st level of heaven. Even though Yi Xian hadn't been able to instantly kill Multilore, he'd been able to suppress him. Bai Dizzy's expression grew even more unsightly at the sight of this. At this moment Yi Xian was a little ridiculously strong. After all, Multilore had encountered a realm. But Yi Xian was actually able to rely on this bloodline power to fight Multilore that was 2 realms above him. This wasn't just heaven-defying, it was abnormal. Bloodline power. Bai Dizzy stared fixedly at Yi Xian. He knew that Dao Yi's bloodline power was very special and extremely powerful. However, he'd never seen or even heard of a bloodline like Yi Xian's. Suddenly, a huge explosion resounded from afar, and it interrupted Bai Dizzy's thoughts. He looked towards the distance and saw that Multilore had actually been pushed over 1 kilometer back, and he was surrounded by boundless blood-red sword energy. Multilore suddenly opened the umbrella in his right hand, and then countless strands of golden light surged out from within it. In an instant, countless strands of blood-red sword chi were torn apart by the golden light, and the sound of something being torn apart resounded incessantly. On the other hand, Yi Xian was blasted back repeatedly by the golden light, and he was pushed back by almost 3 kilometers. When he stopped moving, there was a huge golden net in front of him. Multilore suddenly shook the umbrella in his hand. Retract. Bang. The umbrella shook violently, and then the huge golden net suddenly moved towards Yi Xian. Yi Xian stood on the spot, and he suddenly stabbed with his sword when the golden net arrived in front of him. It was a single strike that contained 3 domains. Bang. The golden net was forcefully stopped by Yi Xian's attack. Right at this moment, the umbrella in Polylore's hand suddenly vanished. In the next moment, countless strands of golden energy slashed towards Yi Xian. The blood-red light around Yi Xian exploded apart inch by inch. At the same time, Multilore suddenly appeared above Yi Xian, and the golden hammer in his hand smashed down. As soon as the hammer descended, the space around Yi Xian warped into a strange shape. Yi Xian raised his head, and then 2 rays of blood-red light suddenly slashed forward. Bang! The 2 rays of sword energy struck the golden hammer, causing it to tremble violently. However, it merely stopped for a moment, and it wasn't able to stop the hammer from descending. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly stabbed the golden hammer with his sword. It was a head-on collision. Rumble. The entire 21st level of heaven suddenly trembled violently. The multitude heavenly king retreated rapidly in the air, while Yi Xian retreated nearly 1,000 feet. Suddenly Yi Xian roared furiously. He leaped up with his sword in hand and slashed towards Multilore. Multilore's expression changed and he raised the umbrella in his hand. Bang! A wave of blood-red light erupted from the top of the umbrella. Crack! The treasured umbrella immediately cracked open. Polylore's expression changed drastically at the sight of this, and he subconsciously put away his umbrella. At this moment, Yi Xian's sword stabbed towards his forehead. Polylore didn't choose to retreat, nor could he. He swung his golden hammer horizontally, and this swing was aimed directly at Yi Xian's head. A life for a life. Yi Xian didn't put his sword away. Multilore didn't put his hammer away either. Yi Xian's sword stabbed into Multilore's throat, but Multilore's hammer stopped a few inches away from Yi Xian's head. Because a sword had blocked this hammer strike. Soul-suppressing sword. Soul-suppressing sword had attacked by itself, and it had nothing to do with Yi Xian. The spirit sword was protecting its master. Yi Xian's soul-suppressing sword was no ordinary soul-suppressing sword. After absorbing the souls of countless powerhouses, the sword had proven itself. Even without Yi Xian, it was still comparable to a Dao validation powerhouse. At this time, Yi Xian suddenly put away his sword spirit, and it turned back into soul-suppressing sword. He stabbed the sword into the center of Multilore's forehead once more. Boom. In the blink of an eye, Multilore's soul was absorbed. Dual swords. One sword to cut the body. One sword to shatter the soul. When he saw Multilore's death, Bai Dizzy slowly clenched his right hand. He didn't attack. Because he was a Star Lord, one of the few people in the Doubting who wasn't good at fighting. He was a civil official in the Doubting and was in charge of the Doubting's affairs. As for fighting, it wasn't something he was good at. Of course, it wasn't that he didn't know how to fight, he just wasn't good at it. Yi Xian put away soul-suppressing sword and he took a deep breath. In an instant, Multilore's blood was directly absorbed by him. Along the way he had absorbed the blood of every single person he killed. Soul-suppressing sword absorbed souls and he devoured blood. After absorbing Multilore's blood, Yi Xian turned to look at Bai Dizzy. Bai Dizzy took a deep look at Yi Xian and quietly disappeared. Yi Xian carried the two swords and continued forward. Soon he arrived at the 22nd heaven, and there was no one in the 22nd heaven. Previously, Bai Dizzy had already ordered everyone in the 22nd heaven to retreat. Those people staying in the 22nd heaven would be sending them to their deaths. Seeing that there was no one in the 22nd heaven, Yi Xian continued forward. This time he moved faster. In front of the heavenly gate, Bai Dizzy suddenly looked at a heavenly general. Go to the two worlds abyss and tell True Martial Divine Lord that Multilore is dead. The heavenly general bowed respectfully and quietly left. Bai Dizzy looked at the 36th heaven and said, I want to know where this person's bloodline comes from. Quickly investigate. Yes, sir. A voice came from not far behind Bai Dizzy. Bai Dizzy slowly closed his eyes. Weeds must be cut by the roots. P.S. Asking for votes. Chapter 1342. At this moment Yi Xian had already killed his way to the 27th heaven. Now Yi Xian was covered in blood. Massacre. Yi Xian himself did not realize that the stronger the killing intent in his mind, the more terrifying the power of bloodline was. Now the killing intent emitted from his body was unprecedentedly strong, even surpassing his sword intent. Moreover, every time he killed someone, his killing intent and the power of bloodline would increase. The more he killed, the stronger he would become. Grow in the midst of massacre. Of course, he could also die in the midst of massacre. When Yi Xian came here, he had already put his life and death aside. He had come here and completely activated the power of his bloodline just to do one thing: kill. After killing his way to the 27th heaven, those experts did not resist but retreated. The current Yi Xian was unstoppable. And Yi Xian did not let these people go. Just like that, Yi Xian chased wildly, and the entire 27th heaven was filled with wails. Not long after, Yi Xian killed his way to the 33rd heaven. The spiritual energy here was much denser than below, and there was extremely pure energy of the stars. Yi Xian did not absorb the energy of the stars, but his body was indeed automatically absorbing the pure energy of the stars. After absorbing the energy of the stars, Yi Xian came to the entrance of the 34th heaven. At this moment, the blood sword in his hand trembled slightly. Yi Xian stopped. The sword spirit stopped Yi Xian. Yi Xian stood at the entrance in silence for a moment, then he turned and left. After Yi Xian left the 36th heaven, he came to a stretch of clouds. From his position, above those clouds there were floating palaces. Doubting heaven palaces were 36, and 72 treasure halls were 72. Yi Xian suddenly disappeared on the spot. His target was the head of the treasure halls, Lingxiao Hall. The Lingxiao Hall was where the Tao ancestor resided. However, Yi Xian did not let go of the great halls and heavenly palaces he passed by. Wherever he went there was chaos. Seeing Yi Xian rush to the numinous sky palace, Bai Dizzy's expression changed instantly. He had previously ordered the doubting powerhouses to avoid Yi Xian and not fight to the death with Yi Xian. They were to wait for the doubting powerhouses to return from the dual realm abyss. But now he did not expect Yi Xian to go to Lingxiao Hall. That was the place where the Tao ancestor lived. It was the dignity of the doubting. Bai Dizzy suddenly said, "Where are the 36 celestial stars?" Chi 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 chi. In an instant, streams of light shot into the sky from the doubting. Soon, the 36 super powerhouses suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. Bai Dizzy was about to speak, but Yi Xian suddenly turned into a sword light and disappeared on the spot. In the distance, the 36 super powerhouses suddenly turned into 36 streams of light and shot toward Yi Xian. In the clouds, Yi Xian suddenly slashed down with his sword. Chi-chi. A stretch of sword light and a heavenly waterfall swept down from the sky. Bai Dizzy's expression changed drastically when he saw this. Yi Xian had become stronger again. At this moment, a dazzling blood light suddenly burst out from the sky. Under this blood light, the 36 super powerhouses were shaken and retreated repeatedly. A single sword strike had forced back 36 Tao validation powerhouses. Seeing that the 36 super powerhouses still wanted to attack, Bai Dizzy suddenly said angrily, "Don't attack, retreat." At this moment he noticed that Tao validation realm experts were utterly unable to harm Yi Xian. These 36 Tao validation realm experts had limitless futures, so they absolutely couldn't be allowed to die here. At the very least, they couldn't be allowed to die for nothing. The 36 celestial stars were just about to retreat when Yi Xian suddenly vanished on the spot. A strand of blood-red light flashed through the battlefield. The expressions of the 36 experts changed drastically when they witnessed this scene, and they retreated explosively. However, Yi Xian's sword was even swifter than them. Yi Xian's sword pierced through the throat of one of the experts in the lead, and then his head instantly flew into the air while a strand of blood sprayed from it. Moreover, his soul and blood were instantly absorbed by Yi Xian. In the next moment, Yi Xian vanished on the spot again. It didn't take long for the sound of ripping to resound, and every single ripping sound was accompanied by a head flying into the air. They were bound to die as soon as they appeared here, because their speed wasn't as fast as Yi Xian at all. Bai Dizzy stared fixedly at the blood-red light in the sky with an extremely unsightly expression on his face, because he noticed that Yi Xian was much stronger than he was a moment ago. Exactly what sort of bloodline is that? Bai Dizzy's heart was filled with questions, because the people he'd sent still hadn't replied to him. This meant that they still hadn't found him. But with the strength that Doubting possessed, that was utterly impossible. Even Doubting had a pretty good understanding of the Dao Tomb, let alone a human at the self-release realm. At this moment, Yi Xian, who was far away in the sky, suddenly stopped. Around him were 36 withered corpses. Yi Xian's eyes were closed tightly while strands of formidable killing intent surged incessantly around him. The killing intent was so strong that it had completely crushed his sword intent. Moreover, killing people wasn't able to vent his anger. Conversely, it caused his killing intent to grow stronger and stronger. Even if he slaughtered all the worlds in the universe, it wouldn't be able to quench the hatred in his heart. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly vanished on the spot, and the palaces in the distance were reduced to nothingness by the blood-red sword light. In a short while, Yi Xian arrived before the firmament hall. The firmament hall was made of glass, and it was 300 m tall and extremely dazzling. Behind Yi Xian was a ground full of corpses. Yi Xian looked at the firmament hall and suddenly slashed with his sword. Everywhere the sword light passed, a sea of blood was left. Just as the blood-red sword light was about to strike the firmament hall, a ray of gold light suddenly struck the blood-red sword light. Bang! The sword light and the blood-red sword light shattered at the same time. On Yi Xian's right stood a man in golden armor and a longbow in his hand. One of the doubting divine generals. Farewell. Wanbi looked at Yi Xian expressionlessly. At this moment, Bai Dizzy instantly heaved a sigh of relief. As if he thought of something, he suddenly said, "Divine General, farewell, just hold this person back. Don't fight him head-on." Wanbi glanced at Bai Dizzy and said, "Lord Bai Xing, is he the one who killed Shen Yong?" Bai Dizzy nodded. "Yes. This person's bloodline power is extremely special. His current strength has increased by at least 10 times. Although he's at the self-release realm with this bloodline power and the sword in his hand, his current combat strength isn't any weaker than a Dao-controlling realm expert." Wanbi glanced at the sword in Yi Xian's hand and said softly, "This sword?" Bai Dizzy said solemnly, "The strength of this sword lies in the realm, not the body. This sword shouldn't be his sword. I wonder if it's Moon Yin Yin?" At this moment, the distant Yi Xian suddenly turned into a sword light and disappeared. He slashed at Farewell. Farewell's expression was calm. The moment Yi Xian attacked, he suddenly drew his bow and released it. A golden arrow light tore through the air. Boom. This arrow forcibly blocked the distant Yi Xian, but the next moment Yi Xian disappeared again. The moment Yi Xian disappeared, Farewell also disappeared. As soon as he disappeared, a sword stabbed at his position, and Yi Xian's sword pierced through thin air. The moment Yi Xian was about to withdraw his sword, a long arrow tore through the air and shot straight at his forehead. Yi Xian blocked it with his sword. Boom. The arrow was blocked, but Yi Xian retreated several hundred feet. The moment he stopped, another arrow tore through the air. And as soon as he stopped, another arrow tore through the air. Yi Xian took a step forward and thrust his sword forward. On the tip of the sword, a beam of sword light suddenly exploded. Along with the explosion, a golden arrow also exploded. However, there was another arrow behind this one. This arrow Yi Xian was unable to block, and directly pierced his chest. The arrow entered half an inch. At this moment, Yi Xian's powerful physical body showed its effect. Seeing this, Lan Bi in the distance frowned slightly. Such a powerful body? Yi Xian suddenly pulled out the arrow and a stream of blood spurted out, but he quickly absorbed it. Yi Xian looked up at Farewell in the distance. At this moment, the seriousness in Farewell's eyes increased. Yi Xian suddenly disappeared, and the moment Yi Xian disappeared, Farewell also disappeared once again. Soon there were many afterimages in the clouds. These afterimages could no longer be distinguished as Yi Xian's or others. In addition, there were also sword light and arrow light. Below, Bai Dizzy's expression was somewhat ugly. Although the two seemed to be equally matched, and neither could do anything to the other, he knew that Yi Xian actually had the upper hand. Right now, Farewell was constantly pulling away from Yi Xian, and once Yi Xian closed in on him, it would be the moment of his defeat. Right now, although Yi Xian could not close the distance, other arrows could not hurt Yi Xian either. Most importantly, Yi Xian was becoming stronger and stronger. If this continued, Farewell would definitely lose. As if thinking of something, Bai Dizzy suddenly turned his head and looked at the end of the horizon. He said softly, "The battle in the Two Realms Abyss is so intense." When he sent someone to pass the news of Polylor's death to True Martial Divine Lord, he should have known the seriousness of the matter. But now the experts of the Two Realms Abyss had not come. This Farewell did not come from the Two Realms Abyss. Before that, Farewell had been in seclusion. When he saw that Yi Xian was coming to Numinous Sky Hall, he had sent someone to forcefully inform Farewell. Now, it was likely that Farewell would not be able to stop Yi Xian. At this moment, the sound of a sword suddenly rang in the sky. Then a figure retreated rapidly. The person retreating was Farewell. In the process of retreating, Farewell drew his bow again and again, and more than a dozen arrows shot at Yi Xian from various angles. In the distance, Yi Xian suddenly waved his right hand, and in an instant, more than a dozen swords appeared around him. In the next moment, these swords transformed into more than a dozen beams of sword light and flew out. Sword Kinesis Flight. Sword Kinesis Flight alone could not compete with Farewell's arrows, but with the power of his bloodline and his sword domain, it was completely different. Long-range attack? So could Yi Xian. Pust. Flying swords and flying arrows crisscrossed in the sky above Numinous Sky Hall, and the sound of tearing kept ringing. The battle was in a stalemate. At this moment, Bai Dizzy suddenly turned his head, as if he had seen something. He suddenly breathed a sigh of relief. It's time to end this. At the end of the clouds, a middle-aged man slowly walked over. The middle-aged man held a long sword without a scabbard. The sword was dark purple, and a golden dragon swam along the blade. The sword let out a dragon's roar from time to time. The Dragon Song Sword. This sword contained the dragon's soul. When the sword was swung, the dragon's roar could be heard. Although this sword was only at the Dao Validation realm, with the addition of the dragon's soul, the sword's power far surpassed that of ordinary Dao Validation realm swords. On the middle-aged man's back there was a sword case. The sword case was extraordinary. It was made of the dragon's bone and was indestructible. In the sword case there were 10 divine swords. All 10 divine swords were made of dragon scales, and all of them were at the Dao Validation realm. Sealing the Dao. Doubting the dragon-slaying sword immortal. Doubting the #1 swordsman. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.